Okay. Hey everybody, Kirby Sonic team here, or Ian Waffles. Today we're doing something a little bit different from my usual, I guess what you're used to as My Hero Academia content. We're going to be talking about the IDW Sonic the Hedgehog comics. That's something I'm really passionate about, and it's something my good friend here, Laviarray, if you want to introduce yourself, he's very passionate about, but we're both in very different ways and similar ways. Go ahead.
That's one way to put it. Hi, so my name is Laviarray. I have been making critical content of Ian Flynn's work for a while, and I have been reading up with IDW since it's introduced back in 2018, and caught up to it now as of issue 27. And I'm here to along with my host here, along with the host here, Ian, to just discuss it a little bit.
Exactly. So before that, for those of you who don't know about the IDW comic, it's basically exactly what it says. It's just about Sonic the Hedgehog. However, one of the main points of discussion is its writer. Most people have probably heard of him. If you know anything about, when people talk about Sonic writing, they'll say the good writer, which would be Ian Flynn. He is the current writer for the IDW Sonic comics, and he worked on the Archie Sonic comics for, I think, about like 10 years. So he's done this for a while. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So both Laviarray and I, we both have a lot of criticisms and observations we want to make about his work. And just going over exactly with this new Sonic comic, what is it about it that's making it really kind of connect for people, making it something that people are saying like, oh, it's way better than the old stuff. And what does it have to offer as a Sonic fan of both the comics and as the games, and do we think it has much merit to it? So I'm just going to let you go first, because I think you have the most decisive, in-your-face opinion. Like, you've got it. So you go ahead.
Actually, if you don't mind, and I'm going to come back around and answer this, I kind of want to answer that question first.
Okay.
And since I really hate that answer, I really want to try spending the rest of this discussion just kind of going back through and answering it. So when it comes to what people get out of this comic as someone who's been talking and watching a lot of people who have been reading the comics and say they've been enjoying this, it's mainly just because it's dark, gritty, and better than Forces. I hate that answer because that's like saying a D is better than an F, and it's like it's still a D. But let's go ahead and just try talking into it. So you want to start with the Metal Sonic arc?
Yes. Okay. So yeah. So with the first arc, it takes place how long after Forces?
6 months.
Okay. So it's dealing with just basically the aftermath of Sonic Forces, which for those of you who did read the Archie Sonic comic, those took place either within the war or post-war, which I think, surprisingly, for a character like Sonic, is actually a pretty decent idea. A character who's all about freedom, running with the wind, doing things his way, would fight against a power that has either taken away the things he cares about or is trying to. So I actually think that's a decent setting, and I was really excited whenever this first started that we were kind of going back to the old Archie or Sonic the Hedgehog Saturday morning cartoon formula. But right off the bat, whenever I was looking into the Metal Sonic's story, I just immediately noticed that it seemed like the way Sonic and Co. and his friends were written, it almost seemed like they... I don't know if this makes any sense, but it almost seemed like they didn't have a character. They were either just speaking plot, giving exposition, or just doing the bare minimum of Sonic will run up to a couple of folks and do a wink or something and then run off. There might be a conflict, quote unquote, where characters will be like, hey, Sonic, maybe you should help. And then he'd be like, nah, but I don't wanna. And it's because I'm Sonic and I go with the wind. They're like, you know what? That's a pretty good explanation. And then he'd go to the next town. And for a character who's, all about going all over the place, it really didn't feel like we were going anywhere for a while until eventually we just had a big fight with Metal Sonic that seemed pretty anticlimactic. We gathered all our buddies who we barely characterized. We win, and we've accomplished what? So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
I gotta be honest. I can expand on that. But that's pretty much what happened. It's like, if we,
Well,
like,
I know you'll probably definitely want to talk about the Eggman subplot.
yeah.
But as far as the main thing, do you have any ways you could kind of put into words the feelings I had about it? 'Cause I know
Well,
you've thought about this a lot more.
oh yeah, sure. So when it comes to the first four, that's pretty much what that is pretty. When it comes to the first four issues, that's pretty much what happens. Sonic shows up. There's some type of conflict. He ends up working with somebody else in order to take it down. They do, and then he just ends up leaving off to the next town. There might be an emotional scene. There might be an emotional scene that's supposed to give some character insight, but that's it. The problem here is, and this is kind of the thing when it comes to Flynn, and I think this is what I find so fascinating about him, is that he knows what particular things are supposed to be effective in storytelling, but doesn't understand why or how they're supposed to be effective. Like, he knows that he wants to try doing introductory issues for Tails, for Amy, for Knuckles, and for Blaze and Tangle. But the problem is that none of those issues, but outside of at best maybe how they end up fighting how they end up fighting whatever robot they're going against, all of them are interchangeable. There aren't really any major story beats or plot details that requires any of those four characters to be there. You can swap them around and lose nothing. It doesn't really work as a good character profile for getting any insight into Knuckles or to Tails, to any of them, to be honest, unless you're already familiar with them or you're just really wanting to see Sonic content. Because if you honestly, like, take for example issue 1. Besides the one page that Flynn dedicates to Tails talking about his own emotional problems with, really not even page, just like 3 or 4 frames that are dedicated to Tails talking about how he was so traumatized for losing Sonic back in the game. What happens in issue 1 that really requires Tails to be there?
Right. Because none of the robots really were like, oh, this one's in the sky. How am I going to get up there? Well, it's a good thing we have my good buddy Tails. Or this robot, it's way too fast. It's even keeping up with me a little bit. But I have a buddy who can back me up. Like, it doesn't, when you finish the issue, unless you like Tails already, like you know who he is, there's no reason to kind of even expect that he'll be important. Just that as far as we know, if you didn't know anything about Sonic, I feel like you would see Tails and what he feels and be like, oh, he's just like a really concerned like citizen, or like he's just one of Sonic's friends,
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And the same thing kind of happens with Amy, to where they establish she loves Sonic. She would follow him in anywhere. She's a lot more mellow, which I appreciate. But she's apparently just good at being like, hey, do this, this, and this to protect this town that we as the reader barely know the foundation of. So she can just say things like, watch your flank, go to these corners, climb the town hall and do this. And then we just watch Sonic blow things up. And eventually they're on those towers and those bridges and things. And then they help out and you go, hey, yay, Amy's a good tactician.
Put a pin in Amy. We need to come back to talk about her, but let's get through Metal, and I want to come talk about how Flynn's been writing her. But
okay.
That's pretty much it.
We both have some thoughts on that. But the main point I wanted to get to is just simply that I feel like I think this is fair to bring up as a comparison. Something you've talked to me about a lot is One Piece, and how you kind of look at that as like that's an adventure story where we go around to different places and pick up new friends. We have these kind of fun dynamics with these big personalities, and Sonic characters should easily be able to fit that mold. And this 4 issue period really doesn't at any point make you go, oh man, I can't wait to see the dynamic between Sonic and Knuckles. Oh man, I can't wait to see the dynamic between Sonic and Tails. Because the only difference in the dynamic is maybe Sonic will tease Knuckles and then they'll fight bad guys. Or maybe Sonic will tease Amy and be a little uncomfortable and then beat bad guys. So it doesn't create a sense of like, I need to see Knuckles again. And none of them do anything too especially crazy for you to, because they're all kind of helping Sonic to like Amy will hit Sonic, Tails will throw Sonic, Knuckles fights on his own, but they'll team up. And then like Blaze will chuck Sonic through a giant thing and they'll blow him up together. And so again, it doesn't really create any interesting dynamics that I would think would make a person go, "Ooh, I can't wait to see these characters come together." And God forbid you even know how Amy and Knuckles would talk to each other, because they don't seem to have as big of personalities as you would expect from them from their games. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Agree, disagree?
Oh no, completely agree.
Okay. So that's just what that was just my main point for the beginning sections, because I'm, as a new reader or a Sonic fan, I really do feel like you're getting gypped out of content outside of the very good art. The artwork is very good. And those guys are doing a fantastic job. But as far as getting attached to the characters, as far as laughing, caring about them, or being impressed, I feel like it's very limited. So I'll let you take the next section. I've been talking a lot.
Oh, sure. Okay, so let's talk about Tinker.
Okay.
So when we get to issue 5 and issue 6, this is when we end up finding out that Eggman has been hiding out in another random town, and it's actually because he ended up getting amnesia at one point, and now he's working as now he goes under the moniker of Mr. Tinker, and he's all good and trying to just put people trying to help the kids and just fixing anything he can, and just trying to put the trains trying to just do things good that can help out the town. And I am not and when it comes to this arc in particular, there is not one thing about this that doesn't make me genuinely question the concept of there's no such thing as a bad idea, because this absolutely was. Like, first off, just the setup alone annoyed the hell out of me, because not only are we supposed to trust when it comes to the idea that we're supposed to believe Eggman is a good guy just because he's Tinker's a good guy because he said it, but we're also supposed to trust this random dude that we've never seen before, and Chaotix, who, even if you love them, they're defined as being idiots throughout the entire franchise. So it's like, you have 4 people here who are trying to give them credit who have no credibility, and if you're familiar with anything in the franchise, I can't think of almost every branch of every story-driven version of the franchise has at least one person ends up either trying to play cover for Eggman, or ends up basically being a liar, and ends up being a liar Two-Face, or ends up being tricked by Eggman. So it's like, it's not even, so on that alone, when it just comes to selling it, it's not even a good sell. When it comes to just trying to convince us that he is a good guy now. The only reason that we're able to say this is because Eggman gets intimidated by seeing seeing his robots coming into town, and then he ends up hiding away with some kids. Then Shadow kind of comes in, and then we have this whole pissing match between Sonic and Shadow about Sonic thinks he should save him. Shadow thinks that he needs to just go ahead and just end him, and then they end up coming to a stalemate, and Sonic tries more or less emotionally blackmailing him in order to get him.
He does.
Yeah, he pretty much does.
A specific thing he says is he's like, you tried to take over the world and kill everybody, but you're good now too. And it's just like, yeah, but Shadow chose to do that, and he didn't kill anybody. And the reason he was doing such things was because he misunderstood his purpose, and ever since then he has lived to try to fix those things. Dr. Eggman, or Mr. Tinker in this scenario, has amnesia, could regain his memory, and we know for a fact that if he were to regain his memory, he would not attempt to be good. So it just seems like a weird, like you said, emotional blackmail. But I'll let you continue.
Because the thing is, I'm trying to figure out, it ends up getting objectively worse when we get to the end of this arc. But I'm just thinking as an emotional, as a philosophical debate, I don't even get what's the point of this, because not only do they just try to strong arm and make it seem like there's only 2 options when there's a billion different things that you can do here. Even the smartest one, where it's just have someone who can keep control over him, watch him, and just do that. But my problem here is, why even put this kind of plot here in the first place? Even if you didn't know about Flynn's interview on Game Informer, where he said that he always wants to keep Eggman as the main villain.
Mm-hmm.
it's Eggman. You know this is never going to be permanent. He's going to go back to be like, I'm not talking about his story, just from an audience perspective. You know that this is going to be undone in the first place. So the problem here is
And the audience wouldn't want him to stay good because you want to see Sonic fight Eggman.
Right.
Yeah.
And so not only that, so it's like, even in context of like, okay, what are you trying to do here? What is ultimately the point of making Eggman good? Because it's not even a just or a fair look at this type of ethical dilemma, because instead of trying to look at every single way it can do, it just kind of puts it at the crossroad of, do you kill him or do you just allow him to function around and just do whatever they want, which neither one of the and the problem here is that the story later ends up kind of giving the most cynical take of this, that I genuinely wonder why this is even here. That just genuinely makes me confused. What was even the point of doing this? But even just in these two issues alone, it's just so maddening that it tries introducing this ethical dilemma. But I don't know. I got to be honest. I'm trying. Am I allowed to talk about what happens later, or are we going to try to keep this like in chronological order?
Oh no, we're good. You can go off, but could I bring up one thing real quick?
Go for it.
All right, so something I was thinking about is because for people who maybe aren't as aware of the story, or maybe they do read it, they might say, well, it's just maybe you're reading too much into it, guys. Maybe maybe it's just supposed to be like a fun little twist, and the ethical dilemma, like, that's there, but maybe that's not the point. But no, it is the point, because the thing that I feel like Flynn should have done is he should have given Sonic a reason to care. And he tries to fake a reason that Sonic would care. And it's just that, he seems like he's cool. But it's not even like Sonic spends any time with him. Like, he's been with him for 10 minutes, I think, like in real time. Mm-hmm. Or does he spend the day with him?
No, it's 10 minutes. It's nowhere, an hour tops.
So Sonic just he meets Eggman, and Sonic does what he feels like. I totally get that. It's how he is. However, that is not going to be like, of course his friends are frustrated when that happens. So of course I'm also going to be frustrated when he just looks at a scenario that this person tortured him. He's done all these horrible things. He cares about his friends. Sonic, before he cares about what he wants, cares about his friends. So I feel like regardless of if he's like, I should give this person a second chance, he should care about the safety of his friends. So the fact that he very clearly, he's just kind of like, I don't know if I trust you. And then he's like, here's a few signs that say he's good. It makes it to where I don't know what Flynn is trying to get out of me as an audience. Am I supposed to care that Sonic cares? Because you could do that. You could you could build up Sonic's relationship with Eggman. You could have him spend a full day with him, maybe, and he gets caught up in the idea of like, no, he's doing all this, he's doing this. But they really don't. They just have him say, they have him show Eggman Land, his little fun park. They have him just show that he's nice, that he's a little bit timid, and Sonic's just like, well, I guess it's fine. And then when Shadow shows up to confront him on it, he does his darndest to try to make sure that Shadow feels as guilty as possible, and that Shadow knows he is as wrong as possible. And so it really is about the moral dilemma, because it's not an emotional dilemma for Sonic. Mm-hmm. It is not a funny thing. Like, it's not like some dark comedy. It is about this moral dilemma. So the fact that, one, it's here in the first place with characters that we barely know, especially if you're just reading the comic, because we barely know any of these people. You're also just you're not attaching anything to the audience. So I think that's just another big weakness of it. So that's the only thing I wanted to mention.
Right. And then one, I completely agree. And then afterwards, and then just to go ahead and fast forward a little bit, then we end up, then once obviously Eggman comes back to normal, then they try having like several moments throughout the entire story where it's like Sonic, where people keep either Sonic's beating himself up or other characters are telling him that was a bad decision. Mm-hmm. And then Tangle comes, and I'll get to the Tangle thing because that's a whole other conversation.
Oh yeah, the Metal Virus arc is crazy.
Yeah. And then we get to the end of it, where Eggman's trying to taunt Sonic for Eggman, I gotta be honest, is trying to give him the Joker, I'm going to get in your head kind of the Joker, I'm going to get in your head kind of line, which whatever. But then it's like, oh, we're going to go right back to where we were before, which I'm just like, if you're going to go ahead and introduce Tinker, if you're going to go ahead and try to have him be like this good guy for a bit, then have him get reversed, and then not even properly challenge Sonic on his decision in the first place, and then just have them go right back to where they were at the beginning, at the end of, let's be honest, how they are in the games.
Yeah.
What was even the point of doing this?
Yeah, there is no nuance to it, because Sonic can be like, no, guys, like, because at first he kind of tries to deny it, like, hey, I did what I thought was best, but at a certain point, I think they are starting to, like, heavily be like, no, Sonic was wrong. But if the moral is just, well, Sonic was wrong, then again, what's the point? What would Sonic get out of this? Don't trust people with amnesia. I'm trying to piece together exactly what Sonic gains from this and what does Eggman gain from this. It just kind of seems like just a thing to throw in our face of, like, yeah, the Sonic comic has this moral dilemma of what do you do with this type of person? So just, yeah, like you said, it just feels like, what's the point of it?
Right, and two things to that. One, let's go and bring the Tangle thing back up. That's exactly what happens, because after SBO ends up kind of trying to call Sonic out for the vainness of it, for how stupid of a decision that was, Tangle then comes back in and basically relieves Sonic of all of his guilt and saying, like, you did what you thought is right. All you can do now is just move forward. And it's like, so you're pretty much saying that there's nothing for him to learn from this, and that ends up being enforced when you end up finding out that Flynn just kind of wrote this in. So it's like, there was no correct decision. This is just meant to be something open-ended for the audience to figure out. And it's just like, this is not, like, forget the fact that you literally just, let me put it this way. Let's say you wanted to try to do, like, you got to the end of issue 11. You got to the end of the Metal Sonic arc, but you want to try to do a story where you wanted to write in a situation where Eggman ends up getting his memories back, and you wanted to try to establish how dumb of a decision that was for Sonic to leave him alone without any type of protection, just to allow him to live his own life. And what would you do other than what happened in the Metal Sonic arc?
Oh, sorry. Can you say that again?
Oh, if you wanted to show how dumb of a decision it was to allow Sonic to, how dangerous and dumb of a decision it was to have Sonic just let Eggman just be Tinker, just allow him to go on his own without any type of security or any type of protection from him going back to normal. If you wanted to show how dumb of a decision that is and how dark the consequences could be, what else would you do? What else would you have to change from what happened in the Zombot arc?
Yeah, nothing.
Right. And it's like,
that could have just been Eggman's next plan. It could have just been like, Sonic's doing his own thing. Maybe Eggman really is gone, but YOLO, turns out Metal Sonic was defective, or no, it was just Metal Sonic was just doing it on Eggman's orders, and now Eggman does his next plan at the end. So yeah, like you said, it doesn't. There's if there's no idea or like point that's trying to be made, if it only serves to just, I guess, just make Sonic feel bad, not to like to question anything about Sonic, because what I would assume you would do with that is to evaluate or kind of scrutinize Sonic's go with the flow attitude. As it doesn't matter. I'm just living by my own feeling. It doesn't matter who's wrong or who is right. Take your bet on who is right. Like that. Like that's an interesting thing about Sonic. And so I feel like if you're gonna do this, that's what you attack. Or you could, if you want really gutsy, you would go to Eggman and you try to add in a bit of nuance of like, yeah, he kind of liked being Mr. Tinker. But if none of these avenues are going to be explored, then it really just is just to guilt trip Sonic and just be like, hey, we have this plot point about, should you, what was the right decision? You decide, internet, and then we just leave it.
Yeah, and the thing is, and this is kind of this issue I've seen a lot of times come up with other shows in particular, where it's like, do you stop the guy? Do you try to do something to stop the person from committing genocide, or do you do nothing to hold your own moral code? And it's like, if you have to choose between causing a genocide and not causing a genocide, and even if it's just the potential, but you end up kind of writing an entire story where that decision led to another genocide, you made the wrong decision.
Right, because
Yeah.
things just end up worse regardless. But now it's like Sonic's fault, and not just like Eggman just being a jerk like usual.
Right, and I want to come and just to build off of your point, I actually would not mind challenging, having a story where it's about challenging Sonic on his go with love mentality. But
Yep.
even if that was the case, even if that was supposed to be the story, not only do we need to have something this dark. No, my question really comes down to is one, did we really need to have something this morbid to
Like
really challenge that?
like immediately.
Right, and two, did we need to have 17 issues dedicated to it? I feel like that did not need 17.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it's not dedicated, but it's not answered in 17 issues. Like, it's still not been answered. So
Right.
it's still just like this dangling plot thread that, again, it doesn't, just like the original 4 issues, it's in the same way that those were just like, Sonic, would you like to join the resistance and help? Nah, I do things my way. In this, it's for 17 issues. Sonic, you idiot, why did you do that? Or Sonic, like, maybe it wasn't the best decision, but it was your decision, and I trust you. And he's just like, yeah, gotta go fast, and then he leaves. Like, that's all the ground we make.
Yeah.
So we're not, which you would think that by having other characters' perspectives, that would be how you would flesh out the idea, is maybe Sonic hasn't come to a conclusion, but all of the other characters would have maybe more nuanced opinions. But it really just kind of is either I disagree with Sonic for doing it, or I'm like, Sonic, you probably shouldn't have, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So,
okay, you ready to move on?
Yeah, I think we've covered that pretty well. So the point of that would just be simply so the Metal Sonic arc. Do we want to go back to the Metal Sonic arc with like the fights and Metal Sonic himself?
Yeah, let's get back to the Metal Sonic stuff.
Yeah, because we are going in order. So right off the bat, we have first 4 issues, barely establish our characters, do not create anything that as a reader you should want to come back to and be like, I want to see these characters, unless you know the characters. And then as far as this Eggman story, it is creating a dilemma without creating an emotional weight to it, and just kind of there for the sake of itself, with, as stated by Ian Flynn in one of his Bumblecast podcasts, with no clear definitive answer or even a sort of vague message to lean towards. So it's just kind of there. So that's what we're starting with, and then we'll move on. So what did you want to talk about next with the Metal Sonic saga?
Here's the thing. We skipped over something, and there's a reason why we skipped over it. Because the thing is, throughout the first 5 issues, we keep establishing that there is someone who's controlling all of the drones that have been attacking everybody. Now, it's been sloppy because it was sloppy from a writing perspective, because Flynn just kept having the character say they've been more tactical in their approach now than they were before, even though there's really nothing visually to display that. But that's a whole other thing. Then we end up getting to, and it keeps cutting back to whoever the mastermind is sitting in Eggman's chair. And it's like, and it keeps trying to build the suspense of, who's this going to be? Who's this going to be? And then we get to issue 6, after finding out that Tinker has been here the whole time, that Eggman has been in this town the whole time. Then we come back to the chair, and it's Eggman! It's like, what? And then we end up coming to issue 7. Sonic is on the egg carrier, which, side note, besides the Tinker subplot, you can cut to issue 1 to issue 7 and lose nothing. There's nothing here. There's nothing in those past 6 issues that really set up or really required Sonic to have to go through all that stuff just to come to 7. But that's all. But again, it's just how weirdly Flynn structures his stories. So we end up coming to 7. He ends up coming onto the egg carrier, busts through a bunch of robots, ends up coming across Eggman, then questions him, and then Eggman says, "You saw through my disguise," and then reveals himself to be Neo Metal Sonic, and has this whole spiel about
Sonic Heroes, right?
Yeah, and it's like, what was even the point? Like, what was even the point of doing the double mislead? Because it's just like how we were just kind of summarizing the whole thing. It doesn't really affect anything, and honestly, it would have made even more sense if you had just been having Mel display himself throughout those 6 issues, throughout the first handful of issues. Then they end up coming across him in issue 7, and then the Tinker subplot either happens after this, or Tinker subplot happens while they know that Eggman was on the ship. So there was no reason to do that mislead. And
I think if anything, sorry to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
I was just gonna say, I think if anything, should be an anticlimax, because besides Eggman, the most consistent Sonic villain is Metal Sonic. If I'm correct. So I feel like being like, oh, it's not Eggman, it's his wordless, personality-less robot partner. Get excited, guys! Like, I feel like, well, then immediately we know his plan can't be anything special, because he's just like a mindless robot. Or if he does have a mind, it's kill Sonic or take over the world. So I feel like what you should have done is just played it straight and just immediately said, like, the robots are attacking and they're claiming that, and either like Metal Sonic's claiming he's doing it, or people are just saying Metal Sonic's doing it, and that just creates the idea of like, oh, well, that's weird that Eggman's not taking responsibility. That's kind of weird. And then you have the Mr. Tinker thing as like a reveal, and then you just know that, okay, Metal Sonic's gone rogue. What's he doing? And so that just that alleviates this kind of anticlimax of like, because if you're trying to be like, who is it? Who is it? Why would you go with like the second most obvious answer?
Right.
So I just feel like that's just you could have simplified it by just being like, Metal Sonic's the bad guy, deal with it. And then if people are like, I don't believe you, I think Eggman's going to be involved, then you do the Mr. Tinker thing and you go, oh, okay. And since it is real, it's not a fake out that he's like got amnesia, you go, okay, well, now I want to know what Metal Sonic's trying to do, because if he's not working for Eggman, what's his goal? So I just, again, it just feels like an extra thing to just be like, tune in next week, children. But I don't, like you said, I don't know if it adds anything.
It doesn't. No, it really doesn't. And I will say, for one, this is probably one of the better, or at the very least, the more visually impressive fight scenes. Because like when it comes throughout most of IDW, I will say, while the art tends to be on point, the action, while I'm not gonna say it's bad, it's usually just really lifeless. Like, I was actually showing the Tangle and Whisper sub series to an art school friend of mine, and she absolutely was laughing at it because of how dull the framing was, how much
it lacked punch.
Huh?
It just kind of lacks punch to it.
Yeah, it was just so underplayed and just so bland in terms of how the entire fight was constructed. And that's not unique to the Tangle and Whisper Tangle and Whisper story arc. That's pretty much been a thing throughout this entire story, except throughout the entire series, except a couple of selections when it comes to 7 in particular, because 7 actually does have pretty good, at the very least, you get a sense of there was actually like some movement and some type of action going around when Metal and Neo are fighting each other.
You know the reason for that? It's because the other issue that I know that I've always praised as being like, that looks awesome, is issue 2 with Amy, because they're both done by Adam. Let me read this real quick. Adam Bryce Thomas. He's the guy who did both of those, and he is very good like at doing like speed line, or not speed lines, like blur effects on like the characters on Sonic, which he's the blue blur. So taking advantage of that, and like he has like all these really dynamic like shots and stuff. So he is doing, and he did both of the issue you're talking about, because I remember that's something I was going to bring up. Like, the issue does look cool in the action sections, but he also did issue 2. And whenever I got that one, like I just love looking at it. And I have like a rating system that I specifically have for Sonic comics just for fun, and I graded that one read for the art, because it is really good. So that's a good thing to bring up, that at least as a visual medium, I do think for the most part it is good, but there are times, like you've said, where it does get pretty great. But it's not as much as we would probably both like.
Yeah.
Okay, but you can get back to your point.
I gotta be honest, like, besides just being a reintroduction to how Neo Metal Sonic's powers work, nothing, and just introducing him as the actual villain for the story arc, nothing really. I got to be honest, that's pretty much all that happens in this issue. Yeah. Unless you got anything to say.
No, it's mostly just like, I do think it is an issue that if you do read it, like if you're like going through, I'd be like, hey, you know what? Read it for the art. Like, you don't have to read what they're saying, but like skim through it. You're gonna take at least one screenshot. You're gonna be like, that's a cool picture. So that's all I got for it.
Okay. Now here's the thing. We might actually have some disagreement about this, and I don't think it's gonna be a strong one. But when it comes
Okay.
to issue 8,
Okay.
this is probably the first one I'd say comes to being remotely good.
Okay.
Not really good. In any other series, I would probably forget. I probably would have forgotten this even happened. But it's the first one where it seems like the characters in this matter now. And so this goes back to what issue 4 was doing, and to a certain extent 5 and 6, where it's just introducing more characters than the story really should really be trying to introduce at this point. And ends up introducing Sonic. Sonic ends up going to this another random Eggman base, and he ends up coming across Silver, who is saying like, "Oh, there's a guardian angel here who's protecting me." And then they end up finding out. Then they end up finding out that Whisper's there. Now this whole thing. Now here's the thing about Whisper. On one hand, I do like the fact they do try introducing someone who's a bit more reserved and nervous when it comes to interact. Oh. Was that you or me?
Oh, that was me. I just said yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to when it came to Whisper having that own reservation, that's when reservation about interacting with people, and that's the reason why she was keeping a distance, and that was ultimately a thing. I actually like that. 2 massive problems with this.
Okay.
First off, well, not really one massive problem in particular is the fact that while I do like the fact that Silver was able to get her to, especially after Silver realized that he was being too forward at first, and then reevaluated and tried to try to talk to Whisper again and give her another chance to open up, and that's when she did. I like that. My problem here is that Whisper does not commit to the coup there a bit. Because as much as they keep trying to say like she is super reserved about anything, super reserved about emotionally connecting with others, it's never really been an issue. There's never really been a problem. It's not really a problem for a character from her now. Like even in these extra issue that we end up getting later, where Jules trying to be friends with her. It takes like one issue, then she's already making friends again. Like she doesn't really commit to the fact that she's supposed to be like super reserved to making friends. In her first few appearances, she already has like arguably 4, and it's like they don't really commit to that, but they simultaneously still want to try to have on this whole idea like, oh yeah, she's super shy and reserved, but it's like she doesn't commit well to it. There's not really any downsides or any type of baggage to this actual problem, and pretty much from here on out, while she's not super talkative, she's totally fine with interacting and honestly being friends with other people.
Okay. Did you have another point?
Her weapon. Actually, you go. We'll talk about this, and then we'll come back to her weapon because I want to talk about I want to talk about her gun. But go ahead.
Okay. So yeah. So I really there's 2 characters in this whole thing that I actually like in the IDW Sonic comics, and one is Whisper. One, I think her design is fantastic, like perfect. I adore it, and I want her in games. 2, she can if they ever want to do the playable character again, scrap that. Just give that game style to Whisper. So the Avatar character, I mean, from Forces. So what I really like about her, and what I actually really like about this issue, because as soon as you said it was good, I immediately had things to talk about. And I remembered it. So first of all, Silver, the fact that the Archie comics did such a good job of reimagining him to, instead of an edgy idiot, he's just like he's a sincere, gullible, really wants to do the right thing idiot. And it's very endearing. I think that this is a very good introductory chapter to Silver, because from this chapter how Silver's going to act. He has this and he has a contradiction in his character, which is great. He has this overwhelming, like, amazing power, and yet he's very gullible. He like freaks out. He doesn't even think that he's probably that powerful. He's more interested in like this random, like, mysterious, she's an angel, she like blows up the robots when I was gonna get hit because I don't watch my back. Ooh, like he's this fun character to be around, I feel like, and you immediately know that he's going to bounce off other characters very well, and you can see how that would work. Like, you could easily imagine him like talking to Shadow and just like bringing up to him like, why are you like so angry, man? Like, we're all working together. Like, what's going on, dude? And Shadow would get like mad at him or something. He'd be like, okay, I'm sorry. I'll go in the other way. So he has a fun personality. I love Silver. He doesn't do much after this, So I can't say like he's a character I really like in this comic because he hasn't kind of had this too much. But I think in this issue it does a very good job of showing that. And then as far as Whisper, they immediately establish that one, she has baggage, so she has depth to her character like instantly. Two, she does make decisions that go against either things that Sonic wants. We know from her actions, not her words, what kind of personality she has. I'm looking at this one page where she sees like the Eggman computer and she immediately wants to like destroy it. And you can see in her face like almost like fear and anger. And then Sonic's like, hold on, dude. Like we need to stop for a sec. And she looks at him, like almost like are you serious? And then she like just like accepts it. But you can see there's like pain in her. So like this is like a great character introduction, I feel like, for Whisper. So while I agree that the part that you're criticizing is kind of left by the wayside, I think she has enough going for her that you could just be like, that's a missed opportunity, but I don't think it takes away from the character. It's just something that could have added to her that we don't go to, if that makes any sense.
Sort of. Here's the thing. If we were when it comes to the idea, if it was just a missed opportunity, I absolutely would agree. I absolutely would agree with you, and I wouldn't mind if they actually focus on other elements. The problem here is that they keep trying to come back and relying on that for a lot of her follow-up issues. Like when it came to the issue with her and Jewel, when it came to kind of to a certain extent, when it came to her relationship with when it came to her issue with her and Tangle. And even to a certain extent, when it came to the follow-up issue, when it came to the follow-up issue after Tangle got infected, and that whole follow-up with that, the issue, they keep trying to rely on the fact that she has a hard time making friends, that she has a hard time really trying to like she's supposed to be super reserved when it comes to interacting with people, but they don't really commit to the bit. Everything else that you said, absolutely agree with you, and that's one of the reasons why I would say that this is a good introduction. Good introduction to her character. It's just that element I'm not wild about, but that's the one element I have a problem with, because it seems like they really try relying on that with their character a lot, but they don't really commit to the bit or really show any downsides of that character, even though they do try using that part of a character a lot.
She's more shy than like not good at making friends.
Okay, well, shy. Sorry.
Well, but what I'm saying is you're right. But I'm like the series is trying to present it as like oh, she has problems, but she opens up pretty easily. She's just shy about it. So like by the end of this, she's made 2 friends. You know, and she's not like ugh. So I agree with you. I'm just saying that I think the series presents it wrong, but then they try to talk about like, oh, you're bad at making friends. It was like, no story. I think she's just shy. So I agree with you, but so I'm glad she exists, and I really do hope that if this comic does end up going down the toilet, I hope they don't abandon this character, because I think she could easily fit into the Sonic games, and that is not something that I would say about pretty much any of the Archie Sonic characters, even though I love those characters.
Yeah.
So, did we talk about Tangle since we kind of just skipped her? There's not much to say.
Let's talk about Tangle. Honestly, I kind of want to talk about her in terms of Amy, because this is kind of an issue that I've seen a lot. So I'm on Twitter, relatively active, and I've seen a lot of previous Archie fans complain about the fact that she is supposed to be a replacement for Sally. Now, I completely disagree with this mindset, because outside of having the same silhouette, she has nothing in common when it comes to how she functions or acts as a character in terms of how Sally did.
Correct.
She does, however, let's be honest, she's pretty much Amy.
The kind of obsessive fangirl.
But instead of Sonic is Blaze, she's the one who's supposed to be super energetic and constantly looking to try to be as much of a hero as she possibly can. She's supposed to be the one who also is she's super energetic. She's trying to be a hero, and she also has a huge problem of being able to. I feel like there was other things, but those are pretty much some of the major. But those are like the two or three major elements of who makes up Amy as a character. And the thing is, I wouldn't,
I agree.
Yeah, and not to say those are, and that's not a slight against Amy. That's pretty much a Genki girl in a nut. That's pretty much just
Yeah.
another Genki girl in a nutshell. And the thing
Hmm.
is, I wouldn't mind there being another Amy if you could like shift things around or change it up a little bit, so she at least has her own. At least Tangle has her own distinctive style. But the problem here is that Flynn had a really bad idea, where it's like, I'm going to, instead of like, one, he ended up saying that Game Informer interview that he wanted to just create a new female character because he felt so restricted, or felt like too many characters could do enough things. And when it came to couldn't do, they didn't feel comfortable writing any of the other female characters, which that's another issue. But that's more of a problem when it comes to how he views Cream and Rouge. But when it comes to Amy in particular, he ends up for some reason thinking that she's too spread out or too varied of a character, even though it's like, I know he can write Amy. That was actually one of the few things I can actually compliment him on, how he was writing reboot Archie, because he actually wrote Amy pretty well there. But the thing is, in IDW, he more or less just kind of put Amy in Sal's position, which,
Yes. Yeah.
why, like, okay, we've talked about this before, but when it comes to this kind of character and this type of role in particular, I don't get like it's already just kind of restrictive in the first place to establish a main character in a, let's be honest, a managerial position, because unless you make it a more of a strategic kind of story, they're pretty much just going to be put into the background there. And especially with a main character who's all about not really listening to, pretty much just about doing his own thing and not really trying to follow anyone else's lead, it makes no sense to put a main character in that kind of position. And furthermore, it doesn't really do much to give any characterization to Amy. Now, when it comes to Tangle, well, we can come back to Amy, but when it comes to Tangle in particular, she's fine. Like, for the most part, she's fine. It's just she's just kind of there to be another Amy, or just be another Genki girl. But they don't really do it. But besides her just being the wise guy to Whisper's straight man, I don't know why she doesn't really. She's not bad, and again, I don't mind her being here. It's just like she doesn't really bring anything to the table. She doesn't really bring anything here.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I don't know. Something about her just annoys me particularly, because I don't think that I buy whenever she's serious, if that makes any sense. Because she wants to like go on adventures and help people, which is great. But I don't know. Something about this might just be something that I need to flesh out more for myself, but just something about the way that they present her fighting robots and helping people, and wanting adventure, or being considerate of Whisper's feelings. Something about it feels forced on from my perspective, but you seem to be more or less just like, you're just like, she's kind of there. So that just might be a point that I'll stick a needle in, and then if I ever figure out, maybe I'll come back to it later.
Okay, which I'd be interested in.
For now, I just don't vibe with her. That's about it.
Oh no, I totally get that. And if you do, let me know, because I at the very least can see how you can come to that conclusion. If I had to be honest, it's also just because, like, the previous, like, Tails, Amy, and Knuckles, she didn't really get that good of an introduction. Like, they tried coming back around at issue 9 and really playing into the fact that she's supposed to be Blaze's fangirl. But even in issue 4, outside of just going, whoa, it doesn't. It's just kind of. She's just kind of there for the most part to just have like a stretchy tail, and to just kind of be like, yeah, I'm here to fight and be a hero and go on adventures and stuff. It's just, she's just kind of there.
Yeah.
She's like, I would be interested, because I don't disagree with you. It's just, I would like to be more interested about like why you come to the idea of her kind of just being forced into the story. But yeah, I totally get it. She's just, and
I will say Blaze had a pretty good introduction, just because you can just go all out with Blaze's powers. So I think she definitely leaves an impact. You're just like, ooh, I want to, like, regardless of Blaze's personality, I feel like you're just like, oh boy, like Sonic's speed, Knuckles' like beating people up, Tails' flight, but this person is like a thunderstorm of fire. Like, that's just cool.
Oh yeah.
So I think Blaze works on Rule of Cool just regardless, and that's why for the longest time she was my favorite Sonic character. She has a great design, and she does fire. Done.
Yeah, and she's still a favorite of many people just for that too, which I totally get. It's kind of hard to ruin a character who's fire themed, but anyway. Yeah. All right. Ready for issue 9?
Yes, go ahead.
It's set up. It's really just a setup for the final 2 issues. All it is mainly just the character. The first half is mainly just the characters sitting around, talking exposition, trying to figure out what they're supposed to do, and then the second half is just them kind of going to Angel Island and then deciding, hey, this is how we're going to take them down, and that we're going to get ready to take Metal down. This also just kind of shows how shallow of the leadership position the whole Amy thing is, because as much as they try establishing like she's supposed to be the like she's supposed to be the leader of the rebellion, she's supposed to be the one who's managing everybody. None of them are here. Like everyone who ends up participating in the fight against Metal Sonic, it's all named characters. Like outside of maybe like a couple in the background that I might be forgetting, she's not telling or really like trying to be a leader of anyone else besides the 12 other characters who either who are not on her team, and for the most part are never going to listen to her outside of this. This is one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of her being put into this position. Not because I don't think Amy should be allowed to mature or develop or anything. It's just it's a position that doesn't really benefit her, and at the end of the day, it's not really going to give her any actual experience of being a leader, especially since the characters who actually matter, she's not actually going to be leading them on a long-term basis. So those relationships are going to get explored. And the characters who she's actually leading are a bunch of background characters and no names who are never going to be important. So she's leading. So it's basically just leading for the sake of just having that on her resume. Not for the sake of just putting it on her list on her wiki that she was a leader of a group at one point, not really actually trying to show what she gained or how that can actually challenge or explore her character. And this just ends up getting worse in the Metal Sonic arc. But in the zombie arc. But here it's just 9 is most from was mainly just filler and just getting to the setup of, okay, you're not gonna fight Neo Metal Sonic, you're gonna fight Super Neo Metal Sonic. Which, side note, that line, if officially a robot can go super now in the game canon, there is no excuse why Amy cannot go super at this point. I'm just gonna put that on the record right now.
Yeah, but I would say that's more of a if do you want to go on a tangent about the mandates at some point? Not now, but I would say if there ever was a mandate, I think it would be that Amy just can't have one. I feel like Sega would just be like, but why would you give her one? It's like, because why not? Yeah, but she's never had one. Well, why not introduce it? It's like, nah, don't do it. I don't know. That just seems like something they would do.
Possibly. Actually, I would be up for talking about the mandates. Maybe we can do that next time.
Okay. Yeah. But that's like a way whole other topic that goes into a lot. So,
to be honest, I don't think we're going to disagree too much on it. I just, let's talk. When it comes to 9, that's pretty much all 9 is. Half of it's on the debt set. Half of it is just them sitting around explaining the plot. The second half is them just getting to getting to Angel Island and then confronting Neo Metal, Super Neo Metal. You got anything else?
Nope.
Yeah. 10. This is, if there's any particular, this is where the cast number ultimately kind of shows that it's too many and ultimately not necessary. Why having a cast as large is not only a bad idea, but also incredibly superficial, because we end up having all the main characters here. So we have so it's Sonic, Tails, Amy, Knuckles, Silver, Whisper, Rouge, Chaotix, Blaze, and Shadow. Most of which are just spending time fighting a bunch of all the scrubs, and then it's Sonic and Knuckles and then Shadow going up against Neo Metal. Now, when it comes to everyone else, this is where it just kind of becomes noise, because it's not really showing them using their powers in any particularly interesting ways besides Blaze just going Burning Blaze.
Yeah,
no one's
which was very cool.
Yeah. But besides that, it's just kind of characters just kind of blowing up random bots and just kind of just moving along with the plot. Not really much is happening besides them just clearing out fodder. And then we end up getting to Sonic and Knuckles just kind of just getting beat up by Super Metal Sonic, and then Super Neo Metal Sonic, and then Shadow comes in after being told in issue 9.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, after being told in issue 9 not to touch metal, the first thing he decides to do, I'm going to touch metal because I'm the ultimate life form and I can put anyone down. And this is where two things really started to crystallize for me. I always kind of knew this, but this is where it's like, this is really, I've seen some people try to argue that this is a second thing. I disagree. It could be potentially, but as of right now, at the very least, when it comes to how Flynn's been writing, there are two bad. This is where it kind of shows two very bad habits of Flynn's writing style. One, he relies on everyone to be an idiot to keep the plot moving. Like, this is a regular thing it's really going to start. I'm going to start keeping a running total as we start getting to the Zombie arc, because that's pretty much because it's almost every issue on a regular. And two, Shadow has to be an asshole that ends up always making things worse, and it's obnoxiously so. I know some people try to reference like super early on in Flynn's writing, where Shadow was a lot more compassionate and willing to help everybody. But the problem here is that in like 3 of the last 4 times he's written Shadow, it's always in the story. He's always added into the story to make things worse. When it comes to the whole like Angel Island stuff, he was written in there to make things worse. When it came to back in Reboot Archie, he just was solely there to make things worse. When it comes to the Tinker subplot, he was there just to make things worse and add aggravation. And here, he's only here to make things worse.
Yeah, and what you specifically mean is not that the character intentionally does these things, but Flynn puts him in scenarios where, like, for example, in Reboot of Archie, he wasn't like possessed for a time by his brother.
I think that that was a part of that story, but a good chunk of it, that was just him being him just being overly aggressive. That wasn't his
okay. But the point is that Shadow is used sort of as a plot device for these types of scenarios, is what you're saying. Like, regardless of if he decides to do it, it seems like Flynn has like a knack for using Shadow as like a, he's the ultimate life form. He's very powerful, so we'll just and he's very stubborn and I guess mean or whatever. So we'll use it as a way to create conflict, but it's usually not very satisfying.
Right, and it's like it gets to the point that he starts making where he does end up just making ultimately just kind of ends up making Knuckles look like the smart one in the group, which, as much as I love Knuckles and I do think his stupidity is kind of overplayed, even I gotta admit he does end up making decisions that make that's just so monumentally not necessary for the story, and Flynn just likes putting him into that position just to aggravate, just to increase the tension for the sake of it, not really to either explore the characters or develop, not really to explore the characters in any particular way.
Mm-hmm.
And then do you have anything else to say about issue 10? Because that's pretty much...
all I remember about that issue is Burning Blaze. It was sick, and then that's about it. So.
Oh, and this is where we officially established that Tangle has a huge crush on Blaze.
Yeah, but it's fine, but we don't really do much with it.
Yeah. Then issue 11. It's a really... Okay, here's the thing. So here's the thing, and this is for all Superior fans. I am a huge Sentai fanboy. I am a huge fan of like pretty much everything about it, from the over-the-top morphing and roll calls, to a lot of the stupid things that they do in the fights, to the kaiju battles. And one thing that they end up doing in particular, in one of the earlier shows, what we know as Power Rangers Zeo, they end up having the Power Rangers, before they end up getting their Zords, they end up out in their normal suits, climbing onto the monster, and then just trying to fight it with their own melee weapons, and they just climb on the body and just try to find the monster that way. It is one of the dumbest fight scenes you will have ever seen. I bring this up because that's what happens in issue 11. That's what happens in Sonic issue 11. And at the very least, that the Zeo fight was actually was intentionally supposed to be funny. This was just we need a fight scene, so we're just gonna have everyone just hit the monster super, hit the kaiju metal Sonic as hard as possible, and get the emerald out of his body, and then Tails drives this ship into him, and then story over. And this is kind of where where Flynn's anti-climaxes start being a thing, because forget character substance, forget how this ends up being a proper climax of the story. It's barely a spectacle, because it's like, if you've seen Little Mermaid, you've seen this a lot more impressive, because all it is just Tails takes a ship, drives it into metal ends up breaking down back to his original form, and they blow up the ship, but Tails is okay. So it's just, hey, the fight's over, and you just kind of left going, okay, that kind of happened, I guess.
Yeah. One thing that specifically bothers me is how they integrate Sonic trying to distract Metal Sonic so that everyone can do their thing. Because Knuckles needs to get the Master Emerald out. All of his friends need to come along to help. Shadow needs to do something. And so how he decides to do it is basically just taunt Metal Sonic, but in the most lame way ever, where I think he literally says hey buddy, you're supposed to be the better me, but last time I checked, Chogs aren't metal and giant and look like a dinosaur, lol. And he literally does that type of stuff. And then the friends come up and he's like, yeah, nice timing, and then we go. I don't know, and I think that goes into a larger issue I have with just Sonic in general. I feel like he has the kindness. He has some of the kindness of Sonic Unleashed Sonic and Sonic 06 and Sonic and the Black Knight, or Sonic was just a good boy, but not enough to where he's committed to those ideals. Because that's where in Sonic and the Black Knight, having good boy Sonic was so good, because he was in this medieval setting where people are talking about chivalry and honor and all these things. Dude, who even cares about that? Just I'm gonna do what I want and just do what's right, idiot. And I'm yeah, do it. But then he doesn't have enough of the attitude of Adventure Sonic, or especially not pre-boot Archie Sonic, to where he's interesting or snappy enough with his insults. So it really does come down to this middle ground of oh, Sonic's gonna taunt him or whatever, but it's gonna be the most nicest thing, nicest taunt you could ever say. Oh, you don't look like a hedgehog, you look like what you look like, silly. And then we're done. So, and another thing that I know that a lot of people who did read pre-boot or even just reboot of Archie Sonic, Sonic's personality and emotional depth seems to be very limited, and it's because anytime they try to introduce, like you said in issue 1, they try to introduce any sort of emotional connection between him and his friends, it's usually brushed aside really quickly. So Tails might be upset about Sonic, being tortured for 9 months or whatever, but Sonic's response is just going to be something akin to oh, hey buddy, I'll be okay, I'll take care of myself. And he's oh, are you sure? It's yeah. And then he leaves. And it just doesn't feel like there's enough. And I remember when Tails crashes, and there's one shot of Sonic looking nervous, but it's the most barely looks afraid face that Sonic could ever make. And then it's yeah, Tails is okay. So I'm not asking that we torture Sonic like we did in Archie, and really break him doon, but I don't know. It just feels like Sonic is in this weird state in the comic where he's barely mean enough to be like his 90s raw 90s self of he's a little stinker, and he's not nice enough to be a full-blown hero. So he's just kind of in this weird middle ground that's really boring, at least for me. I don't know if you get that, or...
Oh, no, I totally get that. I really think it just doesn't help the fact that, well, to a certain extent, Flynn, I gotta be honest, as much as people giving him credit for, he's not good with character. Unless he is given a manual how to write a particular character, he struggles with it. I gotta be honest, Whisper's one of the few characters I actually think he gets well without being directed. But when he's not when he's like not being directed or told to do particular things, he struggles with it. And you really see like that was really a bad habit that he had in Archie, like in a reboot Archie, because even with all the problems I can list in a couple of them, with how he ends up handling other characters, the Saiyan characters at least seem like they had kind of at least had some type of characterization, while the Freedom Fighters, they were kind of lacking. I bring this up here
Yeah,
because
they
it
were.
doesn't seem like he was get like as much as he likes to go on record in his Bumblecast interview saying that he gets complete creative freedom. I think this is where it kind of comes to the detriment, because unless he's being told to write characters in particular ways or to give them that type of that type of voice or that type of characterization, he just writes them as much as necessary. He just writes to get to that particular point, get to a particular point to keep the story moving, not because he's trying to explore or hit any particular character beats.
Yeah, because I remember back in the pre-boot days, and he talks about this a lot, where the reason Sonic remains the way that I really enjoy is because that was pre-established by old authors, and he had always said like he didn't want the Archie Sonic comics to just be his book. Like he's gone on record to say that. You know, he didn't want to just discard what other people had created, because he's like, I was a fan of the Archie comics, and if I'm writing it now and I've been, and other fans are reading it, how would they feel about me changing the characters they enjoy? So
okay, slight pin on that, slight addendum to that. I find that kind of funny because I ended up finding a thread on Twitter where it's pretty much just going through the fact that he had such a high body count of killing so many of the Archie exclusive characters who came onto the story. I think like by 200 he killed off like at least 14 characters, arguably 15 and arguably one more if you count Charmy's brain injury.
yeah, well, because he was trying to kill off his backstory, I think that he was like a prince and stuff, so that wouldn't get in the way of anything. Oh yeah, he purged the Archie Sonic universe in the Dark Storm. But like the things he purged, I wasn't too upset about. But I understand what you're saying. It is funny. But I do think that the characters that, but like he said, like who's going to be, even the characters like Tommy Turtle, who he killed off. Like I've shown you that a million times, and I think he, for a character that is like so like nobody liked him, he even gave that character a pretty solid send off. So I don't think he just like tossed him aside. The only one he really did that to was the old man in cryostasis, where he was just like, yeah, that's nobody important. So, but I agree with what you're saying.
Okay, I have to add this one in because I know several people who are going to kill me if I don't bring this up. You kind of have to count Fiona in that list too.
The what?
You have to kind of count Fiona into that list too.
Oh yes, but with Fiona had nothing to her, and then he basically removed what was there and then gave her something new. And so yes, that is a character death, really, like for all intents and purposes. But if people are upset about that, I can understand. But my argument to that would just be that what we had from Fiona was that she was literally just put into the background of one of the old Carl Bowlers and old Ken Penders eras, and then they brought her back because she was just a robot, and then they brought in the real one from the Knuckles miniseries, and then they're just like, oh, she's dating Sonic, and Flynn was just like, all right, so anything else? No. All right, well, let's just like make her evil or something. And I think he did a pretty good job with that, but I understand that people's complaints of like, yeah, but I liked her when she was good. So fair point. I did want to find exactly what Sonic said, because I always hate when people don't quote the source material. So he says, you called me your loathsome copy, but last I checked, hedgehogs didn't look like 50-foot tall dragons. And we aren't made of metal or have the Master Emerald as a pacemaker. And I kind of came first, so... And then the bad guy's attack, and then he helps. Yeah, it's like, oh! So, I don't know. It just... And especially since all Metal Sonic is, like, nothing about Metal Sonic as far as we could tell seemed to have, like, an arrogance problem. Like, yeah, he's like, oh, I'm the better Sonic. But that... It feels really forced just because he is a robot. So it's like, well, of course you feel that way. You're the metal version of Sonic. Good for you. And then I did want to find the Sonic and Tails scene. So he says, okay. So Tails looks really nervous. He goes, if you get caught off guard again, get hurt. And then Sonic's, hey, sure, we've had some close calls, but we've come out of it fine in the end, right? Yeah, I guess. I'll be careful. I promise. Okay, thanks, Sonic. And that's it. So, so that's the level of what we're dealing with, which is Sonic, I feel this way. Yeah, but like, it'll be cool. Yeah, Sonic, it will be cool. Fist bump, fist bump. We can show the world what we can do. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So those are the only things I want to talk about. But yeah, we can continue because I'm sure you have lots to say about what we do with Metal Sonic.
Huh?
I said I'm sure you have a lot to say about how we treat Metal Sonic. Once we've captured him.
Oh God, this. Okay, you know what? Here's the thing. I can give. If it was any other villain in issue 5, I would not be anywhere near as maddening if I anywhere near as frustrated with issue 5 as I was if it was literally any other villain. I would not be anywhere near as frustrated because at the very least you can argue in story this is clearly not Eggman. This is someone else entirely. And so it's like, okay, so maybe it would be for the best. And in any other story, that actually would, at the very least, be a good way to just give that one villain a send off, or give that one villain a proper send off. You don't need that wasn't necessary. Here, this is Steven Universe levels of not understanding how people. This is Steven Universe levels of idealistic redemption bullshit, because we end up starting out with the story where Metal Sonic is being chained up, and Tails is like, "Are you sure you want to do this, Sonic?" It's like, "Yeah, go ahead." And they end up turning him on, and Sonic tries saying like, "Hey, I know we've had our differences, but I hope that you can find a new lease on life," and basically more or less tries to basically lets him go without his quote unquote weapons, and just lets him go for the sake of it. And this is quite honestly one of the dumbest decisions I can ever see, because this isn't like some rant, I don't even, because this is honestly, I'm sorry, my brain is breaking right now of how dumb this is, because there's no legitimate reason or no reason to let someone who just tried basically taking over and killing a bunch of people and allowing that being to run free. Even if you want to say, "Oh, they don't have any weapons on them anymore." We've just established that there are like several different egg bases around. Do you really think he can't go? There's not one of them where he can go fix himself up. And it's this weird idea that Flynn is trying to go through where it's like he wants to try to keep the status quo of Eggman and Metal being so great, of Eggman and everyone still being able to fighting Sonic and just keeping that rivalry going. But instead of going the Joker villain route that I also would hate, where it's like, oh yeah, there's this really convoluted reason that if you try killing this character, they'll just come back threefold, and it's like you can't actually put them in any jail because every jail is run by someone that they can easily manipulate, and they'll just let them back out with even a bigger army. It's like there's no way to really deal with them, and it's just there's one thing when you do that, and then with Flynn, he goes in the opposite direction where the characters are complete fucking morons, and they just keep allowing the character to go. Keep allowing the character to run around, the villain to just run around, do whatever the hell they want. And this isn't new for this run too. Like I actually found this out in the pre-boot, all the way back, and even in the pre-boot. Not only when Shadow ended up letting Metal go away without just taking him down without remorse, even though Metal, both like in this situation, had no reason to turn back or turn good, nor had he shown any particular affinity to want to do good. So
are you talking about in the Blaze story?
Yes.
Okay. Well, they do kill him.
No. There was this one story. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it was like Shadow was holding his hand out, saying like, "Hey, Metal, we can work together." And then he hits it. Then Shadow reaches out, hits his hand, and then flies off.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, there's that. But the one I was thinking about in particular was where Eggman ends up having a mental breakdown from Sonic beating him for the umpteenth time. And instead, and I agree with you when we were talking about this before, where it's like he doesn't need to kill. Sonic does not need to kill. I'm totally fine with not having these characters become more murder hobos. Do they need to not? But would it be so irrational to say, "Hey, let's go and put them in jail now"? But instead, in that particular issue, where there's no reason why they shouldn't, Snively just comes up and says, have you seen what you've done to this man who just tried to kill all of you? You made him lose his mind. You've done enough damage. Please go away." It's like, bitch, what? And it's kind of the same logic here, where it's like, instead of it actually coming from the fact of the character of the villain just being either too good or just coming up with a particular situation for why the character would get away, here it's just the character is just being a moron and just allowing the status quo to go back to normal, even though we've just established that these guys are actually dangerous. Like, if this was like Sonic Boom, like the Sonic Boom cartoon, or like just another Saturday morning, or just some kids cartoon where the villain's like some Ice King or something like that, where it's just like their cartoon.
There's like a comedic status quo of like, all right, we'll do this next week.
Right. Then I'd totally be fine with it. But here, Flynn is trying to run off of cartoon logic, but is trying to have serious real-world stakes. And it's like, those are two things that should not mix. But he keeps trying to have the characters function in that setting, function in that mindset. But it's like, it's not a bad mindset to, like, no one really would have that mindset, but he's trying to have some like serious fate of the serious end of the world dramatic background. And it's like, those are two things that you should be trying to overlap. And I don't get why that's a thing here.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, he didn't have to have even this problem in the first place with Metal Sonic, because one, I know that he does this is because we need to let Metal Sonic leave so he can go to Eggman. First of all you have to do is just have them be like, we searched the island, we couldn't find Metal Sonic's body, but he should be destroyed. Like, we searched everywhere. And then you just show, like, in the bottom right, like, he's like on like his last servo, but he's like crawling away, and he gets out. But also, you don't have to humanize Metal Sonic. You don't, because I agree, because like we talked about, I don't think Sonic would be like regardless of if he's a genocidal monster, if he believes that Metal Sonic can be changed, then he wouldn't be like, let's destroy him. But you don't have to do that. It's just Metal Sonic. So if you just don't ask the question, then you don't have to worry about that moral dilemma, because you're telling the audience, like, no, he's like, there is no soul. It's a monster. It is programmed to kill. We do not see him as someone who could change his mind about things. Like, done. So Flynn doesn't have to write himself in that position, but he does, and it comes at the cost of his characters, where you could have just easily, like, it's, if the stakes are like pretty high, I guess, because he's going to get the Master Emerald, but the Metal Sonic story kind of have this like Saturday morning cartoon feel, just a little more serious. Like, they talk about like, ooh, war posts and stuff, but it really is just like Monster of the Week. And so all you have to do is just do the typical thing of, they destroy Metal Sonic, they're like, oh, like, I think he was destroyed. But no, haha, he escaped. That's all you have to do. So it's just weird, like, with the same thing with like saving Eggman and keeping him alive, or trusting Mr. Tinker. It's like, you don't have to put yourself in these moral dilemma positions for the characters. You can just ignore it, and nobody will question it. The most you'll get is like those like snarky, like, haha, does anyone ever think about the fact that, this and this, and then we laugh, and then we go, haha, cartoons, and we move on. Mm-hmm. So it's weird that he puts himself in these positions to make the characters look worse. So,
yeah. And to be quite honest, that's personally an interesting thing about issue 12, because the rest of it's just, the rest of it is set up, but then I don't remember which exactly issue where we end up introducing to Starline, but this is definitely the issue where it ends up coming to a head, where he ends up getting Eggman back from the town, and then Starline ends up trying to reverse engineer, tries to get him back to normal. Then Metal Sonic shows up, completes Eggman's Tinker's transition back to Eggman, and then we just move on to the next handful of issues. So that's pretty much all that I can think of happens in 12. I want to talk about Starline a little bit later.
Okay. So now we're in the Metal Virus saga, right?
Yes, and if there's one... Oh, wait. Also, stupid point number 2. This is also stupid point number 2 with Sonic.
Okay.
All All right. But yeah, now we're officially in the metal virus arc.
Yeah,
If there's one key word I can say about this arc, it's padded. It is so unnecessarily long, which is ironic because I know Flynn went on record saying that he wanted to make this arc seem super tense and super tense and super to the beat and super required. It was like you could literally cut this thing in half and lose almost nothing. Like even without quality control, you can cut this thing in half and lose nothing.
yeah. So that's an interesting to bring up immediately. What about its structure is like padded, and what about it, like what could have been like things to work towards that would have made it feel the way he wants it to, where it's like things are always happening? Because I think from what he's written, it seems like what Flynn thinks is things always happening is like maybe once per issue someone gets infected, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, so is that maybe what he's looking at, of just like all these characters who aren't going to die are getting infected, and therefore we are one by one losing support in trying to beat Eggman? And yeah, at the moment, I don't know how they're going to win. We know they're going to try something with Supersonic, but I just mean like, yeah, if you want to say like, oh man, we've lost all these heavy hitters, then yeah, sure. But it does feel really padded, like you said. So I don't know if this is like too far ahead, but do you have any opinions on the way it's structured that makes it feel padded?
Oh, no, I can say that right now. Like, basically, there are so many issues here that either give you information that, like, even keeping the same amount of people who get infected, there are so many issues here that either are repeating information that either should have been either giving us information that is done better in another issue, or dedicating an entire issue to something that did not need a whole issue. Like 13, for example, is pretty much just issue 3. But now we get to but with just a little bit of setup for establishing that the metal virus is going to be a thing. And
yeah,
issue
which
14,
I did think was done well. I did think the Eggman part was done well.
Yeah.
Eggman's a scary monster. I like it.
Yeah.
He tortures animals, good. But the stuff with Sonic and Tails, it literally is just like a filler fight.
Yeah. And honestly, it's kind of sad that it's like this is supposed to be the fight where Rough and Tumble, and I don't think we need to talk about those two.
No.
With even though they got upgrades, I think they got beaten faster than they got beat up in issue 2, than in issue 3.
Possibly.
Yeah, and it's just like these two are such. I was talking to my friend about this before. If these two were villains for like a Cream Center story, they would be perfect.
Yeah, because they're just bullies.
Right. But when you're dealing with Sonic, who is, let's be honest, is more or less an anthropomorphized hedgehog version of Goku. These are so pleb tier. I don't even know why you even pretend like these two are remotely, like, why are we even trying to structure that these two are remotely a threat? I'm not saying this needs to be Dragon Ball, but I am saying that if you're going to go ahead and introduce some villains, they need to be at least more intimidating than just one has big fists and the other can make stink clouds. It's just such a waste. Like, it's just such a waste of time.
Well, and like we talked about, it's not even because it could be Rough and Tumble there, but there's nothing about the fight that feels like, oh man, do you remember the Rough and Tumble issue where they did this wacky thing? Like, if they're gonna be like gag characters or like jobber characters, then make something fun about them. But all they really have is that they have their silly like blah 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 Rough and Tumble, like they build up to their name. So not even from like just like a entertainment for fun perspective does Flynn try to give them anything special, other than you have a robot and the other guy is like a robot fist, you said?
I think they both had no, one had a pack, I think the other had a tail.
Okay.
Basically, they both had
like, okay, yeah. So yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is just like, even if this issue was filler, like if it was fun, then who cares? But the problem is that like you're saying, the story and us as the reader know they're no threat, and they treat them like they're no threat. Like even on the cover, Tails is like mocking them, and Sonic's just like, yeah, let's go. There's nothing about this that feels needed, because there's no threat to Sonic. There's no gain from Eggman, because I don't even remember why he sent them there. I think it was just to deliver the message, right? I won't stick to any answer because I haven't checked. So
Yeah,
I'll
it's
drop
something
that.
like that. They're
Yeah.
basically this more or less just that. It's either that it was something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll drop that as a criticism because I can't confirm it. So, but the point is just simply that there's nothing to this encounter that feels rewarding or entertaining. So it's doubly worthless. It feels like we could have taken an actual part of the story, like maybe Silver and Sonic, because that's the next one. Silver and Sonic going on an adventure, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could have had that with like Starline and have Eggman doing his thing as the B plot. So yeah, it really does feel like padding.
Yeah, and then so really the only thing that makes this arc, that not arc, this issue in particular, really even remotely noteworthy is the Eggman scenes and setting up for Starline. But we're going to talk about this when we get to issue 26. Issue 26 about how really, I'm just going to go and foreshadow this now. Starline is pointless.
Yeah, he literally does get like yeeted out of the story.
Yeah. And then we get to issue 14. This is another one that is essentially filler because besides establishing that Starline is here and establishing that he has some issues with Eggman, there is no reason with it. Besides that, he's
Show off
trying
his
to
stone's power, right? Like just like what it can do in battle.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Yeah. So it's an establishment chapter of that. Yeah, not too much going on. I like Silver. I like him getting the crap beat out of him. It's funny. But for the most part, there's not too much to it. I will say, so there's the scene at the very end where he grabs Starline and like chokes him and like slams him against a wall and is like, "You don't get to kill Sonic. How dare you?" But the way it's drawn, it's so flat and boring. And you've seen what pre-boot Eggman could look like when he wanted to look terrifying. And it really feels like, because I think Tracy Yardley did this one. And it might not be his fault. It might just be more of the shading. It probably is the shading because the shading's very bright. But that I think you and I had a discussion about this too, where a lot of this arc doesn't feel as dark as it really is, like what the material is happening, because of the coloring. It looks very bright in a way that kind of clashes with the tone. So that was just something I wanted to bring up in that. Whereas last issue, I did think Eggman's scariness came across very well. I feel like for a lot of the story, the Zombots and Eggman do not come off as threatening because they are so brightly lit. And I just think that's a little thing that just kind of it's another piece that I feel like takes away from the gravitas of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's all I got to say about issue 14. Not much happens.
Also, point number 3. Also, this is point number 3 for Silver.
Okay.
So, just to clarify. So, just to clarify, the whole reason that they ended up coming out to this point to see Metal and Starling in the first place is because someone just out of nowhere just told Silver, "Hey, come to this location." And Silver says, like, "Okay, yeah, he's a little sketchy, but who knows? This could be something. This random guy appears. He could be relatively useful." And it's like, even if you want to try arguing this is in character, which honestly, as we're going to find out, this actually kind of makes it worse. So, not necessarily for Silver, but with other characters, but we'll get to that later. Where it's just, again, the story is being moved forward, not necessarily by the characters, not really by the characters ultimately just being aids or just being guided along by what the plot tells them to do, regardless of sense. So the whole idea is they came out of this area just because some random guy told them to come out here.
Yeah.
So point number 3.
Yeah, no, I get you. And it's just a flimsy setup because it means that, because you got to remember these are coming out monthly, and you want your audience to leave with something. And I feel like what Flynn wants you to leave with is like you got to see Sonic and a friend fight something. But like we established, we don't really think the action unless it's like Adam Bryce Pierce. And even then, he did as far as I can remember, he did the Tails Sonic Rough and Tumble one, and I can't remember like anything from that.
Yeah.
He
did this one too.
Yeah, he did that one too. So it's just like the action in the series isn't very good, but also it would just be nice if there was something legitimate to them coming here and they gained something from it. But otherwise, just like last issue, it really just is like, ooh, Eggman's up to something, and that's it. So I think even from like a month-to-month experience, which will be irrelevant in time, it already is now, But I feel like even then, even if you're reading it back to back, you really do feel like, what are we doing? At least on the hero side.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just another, I think, pacing problem that it has that contributes to the padding that you're talking about.
Totally. All right. Now, issue 15. Now, this is the first issue I would say that at least is functional, because at least does things that at the very least it does actually kick off the arc properly. There is not much from, not necessarily from a quality perspective, but just from what the story's ultimately trying to go for. I don't really see any problems. The major thing I just see is at the beginning. This is where I really got Flynn is trying to write Amy to be Sally, because they keep trying to give her the same weighty dialogue of like,
yeah, it's very somber. It's very like introspective.
And it's like, I've seen people try to argue like this means that Amy's being mature, and it's like, I guess, but it's kind of the same problem I had with a lot of Flynn's writing. And we're going to talk about this with 21, but he has a bad habit with kind of dead ending characters where he'll get rid of some quote unquote problems with their design, but he won't really give them anything to do. But he won't really give them anything else to do. So it's like, okay, yeah, Amy's not super boy crazy and isn't trying to force Sonic into marrying her anymore. But now it's just she's
not crazy stalker.
Right, but now she's not really anything besides just, I'm just going to speak really heavily and now I'm the leader at this point. Also, going back to issue 14 for a little bit, because this leads in issue 15. This is also another problem that I just kind of, this is also the issue I have with her leadership position, because now this is just a way for Flynn to make sure that she doesn't have to show up in every issue, which is one of the reasons I think she actually ends up having this position. Because the whole idea at the end of issue 14 is that they end up finding out another place where they can go check on Eggman stuff. But Amy's like, oh no, I can't go. But Sonic has to like convince her into going. And when you read that whole exchange, it's like, okay, read that exchange and then imagine Sally in that position. Would that be out of character? Would that be out of character for her? And that's like the one thing with that scene, everything that Amy ends up talking about with Sonic in that exchange, that's what Sally would end up saying. Amy's supposed to be the gung-ho, I'm super up for doing all this kind of stuff, but Flynn is essentially giving her Sally's position. Now she's not really her own character anymore.
Yeah, and what made these types of like introspective, like, oh man, the world like sucks, man, like what made those like work for Sally is that she legitimately had like, not only was she a princess of like a whole kingdom that is like it's a thing that's also forced upon her. It's a thing that she grew up not really like doing, because she became like this like tomboy like freedom fighter. But once she was then in those positions of power, just constantly bad things happened to her, and her whole kind of arc was just about trying to deal with that and then trying to mend the relationships she did have and just get back into like the fun aspects of like just being with the gang and like being a leader and like just the things like that. But with Amy, like, I don't know too much about what Amy did as like a leader, but I know being a leader probably sucks, but it just feels weird that she's like so like introspective and all these things about things that one I didn't get to see, but also just that seem just way too big for a character who I feel like as soon as it was done, she would either take it a little less seriously, or she would have a little bit more of her personality into it. But now whereas it was okay to me for Sally to be consumed by those things, it doesn't feel okay that Amy has to sacrifice the other parts of her personality to be serious, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the issue, to be honest, I don't really. There's one thing I want to say about this issue. I'm not going to count this as a point. I just found this to be like the weirdest thing they honestly could have done here. So when it comes to the scene, they end up coming there. Then Ruff and Tumble show up again for the third time. They end up trying to fight them. The two end up getting
which is also why you could have cut the Tails story, because if they're just going to show up again and be like, haha, we have this new armor thing, then that just instantly shows you what Eggman's up to, because they get sabotaged,
Mm-hmm.
So it's another thing where you could just you really could just cut that entire issue. Like is it 13?
Yep.
Yeah, you could entirely cut that. But sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no, that's fine. That's pretty much what I was. That's pretty much it. But it's like after that, but so it's like yeah, like I said before, that just ends up making that pointless. But then we end up getting to Sonic ends up getting infected. Now I'm gonna be honest. I'll spend more time on this than I really should, but I just find this to be so weird. So the idea here is Sonic ends up trying to, Sonic ends up trying to go in for an attack. Ends up going in for an attack. He ends up going attacking them after they've been infected. So then he ends up trying to. Oh, I'm trying to make sure I want to look at this thing because I want to go through this beat by beat. So they end up getting infected. First Sonic ends up jumping on his back, jumping on the taller one's back, and then he ends up trying to hit him with a couple of spin dash attacks, and then slides back. And then when he sees that he's been affected, he tries wiping his mouth. With his hand, and then he ends up seeing the virus start to slowly take over his hand and covering his mouth. And I'm just kind of sitting here going, was the point here was that he ate it?
that it went into his mouth.
Yeah, and it's just like why show it that way? Like of all the ways to show that he's been infected, why do it in honestly the weirdest and creepiest way possible? It's like I get that you want to show he felt it, but it's like would it really been so hard to like show him like seeing his hands slowly being engrossed in it?
Yeah, I think it's the typical like anime thing of like, wipe the blood off your buddy. Like there is no blood to do that with, so it just kind of seems a little silly.
Yeah.
Also, I just think the art in this issue is not the greatest, so it kind of like the way the mouth is drawn is a little weird. So that just might be a part of that.
Yeah. I want to talk about the Metal Sonic of really how so here's the situation I was thinking about. So I wanted to talk about. I originally wanted to try to talk about what I would do in particular. What I think should be done with Metal Sonic with this whole infection arc in the first place. But to be quite honest, after reading someone else trying to do an edit over this arc and trying to make it darker and everything, and I just kind of came to the conclusion, and we're going to see this more. This is not an arc that should have ever been done in Sonic. And to be quite honest, I'm not entirely sure outside of trying to be super late to the zombie party why this is even here other than just for shock value, because it doesn't really do anything else. And it doesn't really do anything else for any character. It doesn't really do much for setting up Eggman, because stupidly enough, this ends up being an arc that actually ends up making Eggman, instead of him coming off way too OP or way too villainous, he comes off looking incompetent, which is amazing.
Yeah, I was just saying, like immediately, like we've reintroduced our bad guy, and he's this bad, and I'm gonna have to deal with this for potentially because comics are meant to go on forever. So this is my main bad guy. Oh no. So yeah.
To be quite honest, this is where I would honestly say this is probably the first issue I would say like this is fine. This is not an arc. This is not an issue I consider to be padded, to be like filler for this arc. But it's also the one where it's like if you look at the stuff outside, stuff around it, like what ultimately comes from issue 16 and what comes in the few details that you get in 14. You could have condensed a lot of this stuff and put it in here and called it a day. Like you didn't these 3 issues could have just been one and you would have been fine.
Yeah.
Well, at least when it came to like explaining the rules for how infection works in 16, that could have been here and you would have been fine. But that's all I have to talk about 15. You?
With 15, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fine enough for what this arc is ultimately going for. Like you said before, the art's not great, but
it's not bad. I think there's actually some pretty good shots of Sonic. I just think the face is kind of weird, so I was just trying to add to like why it might have seemed weird to you, like why it might have stood out.
Yeah.
But no, it's not bad at all.
Yeah. Then we have issue 16. more filler, because the idea, I feel like this here was established so that we can establish what the rules are for everything that's going to be in the arc, but at the same time this is not something that really should have taken up this. What ultimately ended up getting established in this arc is not something that's going to be a fact, is not something that's ever going to be a thing. Like what the rules that end up being established in this issue are not anything that really need to be that need to be its own issue, and also could have been other stuff. Like the first part of it is Sonic, Tails, and Tangle ultimately sitting down, and basically Sonic and Tails ultimately kind of explaining what is going on, what ultimately how the infection is ultimately working, and then the other half is basically Eggman just infecting the original town that he was in as Tinker, and just kind of seeing that whole infection play out.
Now, yeah, which I actually think was done very well, because it does look terrifying. Mm-hmm. Like there's mothers being ripped from their children. There's like this one really cool shot of like the town slowly being taken over, and there's like a bird in a tree, and it's like at nighttime it's like filling up with the stuff, and by morning the bird is now a robot, and then it flies off, and then the final page is just a full page of like just this one tiny bird just heading towards the city, and it's like, oh gosh, like this is gonna spread. So I actually thought that was pretty well done in terms of like setting up like, all right, this is pretty scary, honestly.
Right, no, that I do agree with. I do think that was fine. I think the lighting was a bit of a problem there, but when it comes to the content, that was fine. The problem is issue 17 does the same thing. Issue 17 also is about an entire city being infected. It's like, did we need to have two of them? Like, did we really need to have one issue just half of an issue just establishing how the infection works, just for the sake of the audience, when you're just going to do the same thing again in the very next issue? So yeah. This is the one where we end up introducing chaos. This is the one where we end up having chaotix coming in, and this is where Sonic ends up fighting against a bunch of the zombies and trying to save as many people as possible. Uh-huh. And we end up getting, I would honestly admit, at least a decent scene of Vector ultimately kind of begrudgingly putting up that one victim in those cars and trying to save as many people as possible. And
that was great. I really liked that.
Then Charmy came back around and said, "Hey, let's go check this out again." Point number 4, where he ends up needlessly going back to check on this one person who we just established is in fact that this is an infection, and if they touch you, you will get infected too. And then he needlessly goes back into the horde and ends up getting infected again. So it's like, oh goody, we have another character who's a complete moron. And then Sonic ends up. And that's pretty much it for the most part. Like, it's for the most part fine. It's just kind of redundant coming after issue 16. And when issue 16, honestly, if Tails was ultimately in that town like before, and Chaotix was there, this could have been Chaotix was there instead of Whisper. I mean, not Whisper, Tangle. That could have been issues. That could have been ultimately what 17 was ultimately doing. We didn't need to have 2 issues of this.
Right. So combine the chaos of this issue and the last issue, and maybe you could have had like a really strong one. Whereas now it just kind of feels like it was like split. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Or not necessarily needed to be a 2. It could have been a 2-parter. That could have been at least been interesting. Actually, yeah, it could have even been a 2-parter. But it really just is like again, it's just.
I think there's value. I think there's value in like the chaos that happens, because sure, the small town's one thing, but Eggman just kind of does it. So I think seeing our heroes struggle and then show like immediately like, okay, this is like impossible to like really do anything about. I think that is useful, but I just think you could have maybe combined the 2 a little bit. But yeah, if it would have been like certain page count. I'll go to bat for this issue and say, even if it's a little bit padded, I think what it does bring to the table, in the same way that the last issue is like a third really necessary and then a bit of padding, I would say this issue is the same, where I think it's a third really good material of showing like, here's what the chaos is like, and then a little bit of padding of like, Sonic comes up and says, yeah, I'm doing this with the virus. I need to keep up my speed. We already established that last issue. The thing with Charmy, where it's just like unnecessarily he goes back. And Flynn can't even come up with like a reasonable excuse for him to get hit. He can fly, so you know. So I'll go up to bat to it for it and say that I would keep it. I just think you could just make certain parts a little stronger. Because I do think the effect that it wants to portray, especially with that vector scene and with like even this issue, the last shot of them just like Sonic just being like, all right, I'm going to go back and help because I'm the only one who can. And it's just like people freaking out on the egg carrier, Vector being like, man, I'm such an idiot. And like SBO freaking out. Like that's a really good picture.
Oh yeah, no. Oh, to be clear, 17 is not the one I give rid. 17 is not the one I give rid of. It'd be like 17 is fine. Like that's not the problem. My problem here is that this is where we should have gotten where we should have gotten the establishment of that infection. Instead of dedicating 16 to that, we could have condensed that the whole Tangle Tails and Sonic stuff to condense that down and then put most of what 17 was going for in here, because it would not have been that much of a stretch to say Chaotix and Tails were still in that town and then have all that stuff end up happening. That would be a good way to really like show how intense this is, rather than just having another arc set up for, rather than having two issues more or less do the same thing, more or less do the same, or at least having 16 just kind of do that for the sake of the audience when you're just going to do that again as issue 17.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, 17 is for the most part fine. 17 for the most part is fine. It's really just the fact that 16 honestly either could have been combined with 17, or for the most part, or even better, could have been like a proper 2-part to really establish how messed up all this stuff can really go down. Anything really at the end of the day, 16 really need to have more going for it than essentially just be an exposition dump for the audience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Gotcha.
Yeah.
18. Next one's the cream stuff, right?
This should not be filler, but it ultimately kind of is. Because while this is an issue that ends up introducing Cream and her entire, let's be honest, her entire group, for the most part, it really just kind of exists to be there and just to introduce Cream into the story. When honestly, I gotta be honest, I know what ultimately ends up happening with her later, but to be quite honest, she does not. This entire group does not need to be in the story. And to be quite honest, her inclusion later in the story just comes off as kicking the puppy for shock value, but I'll get to that when we get to 22. But for the most part, this issue is...
Yeah, but I like puppies. Because I've talked to you about it. I think Cream's the second good character, because I'm like, man, I actually feel bad for you, girl. Because everyone else, I'm just like, whatever, I don't even care. But okay. It's not. Here's the thing: I don't even care about Cream in like the Archie Sonic comics in Preboot that I do like. I think she's just like fine. She has like one funny. She's funny in Treasure Team Tango, and then like I couldn't care less. But I legitimately feel bad for her. I think she works as a embodiment of the civilians. So I think that that's valuable, because in the same way that we were like, well, there's like nobody to really represent like the resistance that Amy is supposedly training. I think Cream is kind of a perfect example of like just like an everyday civilian that gets hurt. She's recognizable, but she also wants to help and be a hero and help out people. So I definitely agree that they kick the crap out of her. Like they really make her go through it. But I would rather have somebody feel anything in this story, and it always ends up being Whisper and Cream for some reason.
Okay.
But those are the two characters I actually like. But
okay, so that actually so I will agree.
Sorry, what were you saying?
Huh? Oh, what'd you say?
So I was gonna let you go.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so
I was gonna let you go.
I do agree with you. Cream is easily if not the second best, definitely the best character in this story. That's not what I'm disagreeing on. My issue here is more if the story is supposed to, I think when it comes to my own takes on this kind of stuff, I tend to like the fact that if you're going to make a story about a protagonist, they need to be the one who's struggling. They need to be the one who's actually dealing with the problems and the fallout from it. So I get the benefit of having Cream be kind of, at least if someone's going to actually be dealing with some conflict in the story, at least let it be her, which I get the benefit of that. But my counter argument to that would be is, if this is supposed to, like, my counter argument should be that should have been Sonic. Like, that should have been Sonic, the one who ended up being made weak by this whole fallout from what's going on. He should have been one who's ultimately dealing with the baggage and the fallout from it. I'm not against Cream being here, but it's just I'm not against necessarily. I do get the benefits of that, but I'm like, if there should have been a character who was doing that, it should have been Sonic. the reason I say that Cream ultimately doesn't need to be here is also because I do see it more as not necessarily challenging her or really pushing challenging her, pushing her any particular weaknesses or character problems in herself, but more just, oh hey, here's the cute character, I'm going to make her suffer so you feel bad. I don't want to necessarily say it's manipulative, but I do kind of want to just say it's a really cheap ploy to make it seem, it's a really cheap ploy to give the story weight when honestly, like I said before, if there's any character who should be dealing with the consequences from it, it should be Sonic. And I know the story is trying to make it seem like the virus is ultimately supposed to be his punishment. To be quite honest, I actually think it would have been better if one, Sonic was actually immune, but was immune from the virus.
Yeah.
But instead of him getting infected,
and he has to watch everybody else. He has to like watch everybody else.
Yes, and this is ultimately something that we're going to find that once we end up doing a body count, once we get to the end of the story, because besides Shadow, who major has been infected up to this point? By the time we get to issue 27, no one is really, besides Shadow, besides Shadow and arguably Tangle, no one really important or really for that matter connected to Sonic has really been infected or really pushed or really challenges him in particular. And to be quite honest, when it comes to the franchise as a whole, besides Shadow, the only remotely important character that ends up getting infected is arguably Charmy. And that's really low tier. And nothing against Charmy fans, but like he's not like, when people think Sonic characters, he's not like one of the major ones. So it's like if there's any character you would use to try to show like to be the first to be main character fodder, it would be someone in Chaos. It would be either Vector or Charmy for main character fodder. So that's what so coming back to Cream in particular is like, coming back to Sonic in particular, Sonic should be the emotional core. But when I end up seeing a character who, for the most part, doesn't really have much to do with the plot, for the most part, hasn't really gotten a moment to ultimately establish herself besides just being, I'm going to be the character who's like, I'm supposed to be the kid character, and but I'm being forced to like grow up in really harsh environment. And it just comes off like such a cheap ploy to give the story dramatic weight when the story dramatic weight when the story should be having dramatic weight with Sonic and him being made weak by his decision, not by pulling in a child and beating them with a stick to get tears out of the audience. So that's one of the reasons why I'm just not wild about Cream being here. I'm for her being active in the story. Don't get me twisted. Don't get me wrong on that. But this is not but the fact that she's the best character and the most emotionally invoking character in a story, that's a problem.
Oh yeah. So I'll phrase it this way. Maybe more of what I would agree with then is it's not that it shouldn't be Cream, and it's not that it should be Sonic. It's that it should be Cream and also Sonic. Like both can go through trauma. It's just a problem from a story perspective, not necessarily that character that Ian is for some reason like you're saying kind of disregarding Sonic. Does that make sense? To where it's like it's not that, because if Cream was going through this and Sonic was also going through an equally bad thing, you'd be like, would that work for you?
Honestly, Sonic should be the one who should be dealing with it more, not just in the fact he's having the most friends be lost, but just in the fact that he's honestly kind of coming to terms with the fact that not directly but indirectly, because of his own like really vain sense of forgiveness and just kind of letting things go, of just kind of wanting to just live by the wind, he ended up kind of leading to this decision. Now, I'm not wild about that because this is like the most cynical way to try to challenge, the cynical worst way possible is like, like you end up walking past somebody and it's like, I didn't open the door for them when I walked out, and then you end up finding out later that that person, because you didn't open the door, they decided to blow up 5 buildings, and if you hadn't done that, and if you had actually opened the door for them, they would have been so cynical towards humanity. It's like it's just like a really too harsh of a take to really challenge someone on something that's not inherently a bad decision. It's just not really. I find this to just be, like I said before, a really cynical take of how they were handling the whole Tinker subplot. Okay. So,
gotcha. That's fair.
I guess my problem here is that I'm not necessarily against Cream being tortured, but the fact that it's like it comes off less that they're trying to challenge her because of her own character traits or her personality, but more just like they're trying to necessarily challenge her or push her in particular ways. But it's just more, we're just going to make this one little girl suffer, and you should feel bad for her audience. I think that's where that's kind of where my problem comes in.
Okay, now I get you. So then they infect the Chow or whatever, and then we leave, right? That's the end of that one?
Yes.
Now we're going to the infamous issue, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you can take this away.
Okay, so
like everything you would have to say, I agree.
Okay, let me pull this up because I want to do play by play with this one.
This was a big deal, not just for like people like us who aren't really into it, but even like the fans of it, of the story, were like, I don't know if I like this.
Yeah. Okay, so this is going to be stupid point number 5 for, again, Shadow, who's a repeat offender. So we end up coming into this issue. So Sonic comes in. He's trying to beat up all the zombots and trying to make sure that he can save as many people as possible. Now, this is where the issue introduces several things where I'm just kind of going, where it kind of, again, it's like it's trying to put characters in this really harsh situation, but it's cutting them off from like every other viable scenario. So not only does this end up kind of making the whole zombie art look bad, it kind of ends up kind of making the Tinker subplot look bad. First off, when we end up coming into the situation, we end up finding out that there's actually something resembling a military system, and if there's some type of secret special force like there is here that are supposed to be going around and defending people, going around and trying to like keep people off and keep the hordes away. Why aren't they doing? That would also argue that there is some type of there's some type of there's some type of infrastructure here, which would also mean there's probably some type of prison system, and there's some type of and even if you don't want to put it in prison, why is there not at least a handful of people that can be on guard and actually watch him, if not only to defend him from anyone else, but also to make sure that that Eggman doesn't automatically turn evil again. So you could have easily just had some come in here and do this, but instead come in here to actually just at the very least address this problem, the whole problem around Tinker appropriately. It just kind of ends up undercutting the whole idea of like, yeah, there was no one else that could have watched them, or that there's no type of infrastructure, which the story is really trying to run on. Like, it's really trying to run on the same type of logic where it's like, there's no government, there's no type of military, there's no like actual adult system in this universe. It's trying to run off a cartoon. It's trying to run off a cartoon logic, but then it's trying to have serious stakes to it. The second problem is, why are they still fighting without any type of protection? Even the guards in the story end up kind of showing like, yeah, we need to at the very least have something to protect ourselves from being infected. So instead of actually at the very least, like that could have been something that would have been at least somewhat impressive to me from a mechanic perspective, if we were actually trying to see how the characters were being strategic in how they were dealing with the infection. Like, oh, are we going to put in some type of protection, or are we going to try to develop ways that we can make sure we can fight long range? Because even in this issue, they end up establishing that there are whisper weapons, but you could have also spent some time actually having a lot of the other characters in the story figure out, okay, I can't fight close range. How am I going to deal with these guys to the very least keep them at a distance? And that doesn't really happen here for the most part. So when we end up getting to, so that with those two mechanics being introduced in this story, when it's like, why hasn't this been a feature beforehand, nor has it been in anything else outside of this? It's just kind of like, really? So did that make sense? I feel like I rambled a little bit.
Yeah. Well, no. So I was gonna go at it with my take. So basically, what it kind of takes away from, because if this is in the Sonic Forces universe with this idea of there are resistance fighting back and stuff, having different things like this, if you're gonna have a character like Amy be like, status report, we need to like move here and do these things, then because what I could see someone bringing up is like, well, it's Sonic. We just want to see like Sonic run around and fight people, or like it could be simplified. Like, I'm fine with just they shoot lasers or whatever. But it's like, if you're going to have them here and you're going to establish this kind of like war zone like thing, then you could put a little bit of thought into it in terms of just making it fun. You don't have to be like go crazy in depth. But I understand what you're saying, to where it's like, if you're going to introduce these ideas and then just kind of not do anything with them to make fighting endless horde of zombies for like it's been like a year now, right? That we've been in this arc. If you're not going to take advantage of that, then either don't bother with it, so I don't have to have all these questions, or just do something fun with it. Like just have a page where you have like Sonic is rushing over and he's like, oh, I need to go help these people. And then Rouge is just like, all right, aim, fire. And they all have like this like cool strategic thing where it's like, don't worry, Sonic, we've got it like figured out here. And you can even have Shadow be like, yeah, you know, like no thanks to you, la la la. So yeah, so I'm just saying like from an entertainment perspective, not having the things that you're talking about just kind of make each scenario that Sonic comes into just more of the same. Whereas if you're going to have military forces and things, then implement those things to make the story more engaging. So that's all I have to say. So I'm just trying to give like credence. I'm just trying to give credence to your specifics because I could totally see someone saying you're nitpicking. Whereas I would argue from an entertainment perspective, Flynn has kind of written himself into a corner by just having Sonic show up, he hits some things, and then he leaves. So if you're going to have this military setting, then use it for some fun stuff, you know? So
don't just use it as a way to keep Amy out of the story, which I forgot to mention this. This actually ends up happening, I believe, it ends up happening, I don't remember the exact issue. It's either 17 or 18, where basically Amy ends up kind of saying like, oh, I wish I could help with this infection, but it's like, I got to do all this paperwork. And it's like, really? That's how we're going to write. That's how you're going to write this character out, and basically define her by her leadership is because she's doing paperwork. So I know it happened. I don't remember which exact issue it happens, but I know it happens some between 17 and this one. So that's a super point that is stupid point number 5 for Amy. Super point number Shadow, right? Yeah. So yeah, on to Shadow. Oh yeah. So I believe I said super point number 4 for him, but we'll call this super point number 5. Anyway, so we end up getting to this whole fight, getting to the point where Shadow comes in driving with a truck, and then he ends up calling out Sonic for how like, hey, if you had actually destroyed Eggman at the village, this wouldn't have happened. It's like, hey, how was I supposed to know that someone was going to end up getting infected? How did I know that Starline was going to be affected? But Shadows are just saying it's excuses, which, let's be honest, it is. The whole point was not how he was going to get changed back. The question is, could he be changed back? And this is a definitive yes.
Yeah, and you took zero precautions to stop it.
Right. So then we end up coming to this whole... So it ends up taking Shadow from who's legitimately making some kind of sense. And instead of him just kind of... and then with Sonic telling him like, oh, if you end up getting infected, just run fast enough. You should run off like me. Which I'm not sure how that works. Like, okay... When it comes to the infection, I get fine. If the whole idea is that Sonic's body either can burn it off by running so fast or etc. But it's kind of weird if the whole idea is supposed to be if you just literally run, it just falls off of you. So, but the thing is, Shadow only goes as fast as Sonic because of his boots, not because of like, he's not legitimately that fast. So the idea here and the thing is, this literally could have been this honestly could have been fine, but the fact is, Flynn had to emphasize the fact that he's supposed to be as egotistical as Vegeta, and ends up saying, when Sonic tells him to run, Shadow tells him, "Cowards run, I win," and then he just ends up being the needlessly edgelord that he can, and just goes in and just tries literally going in close combat and fighting all the zombies. I've seen people try to justify and rationalize this by saying like, "Oh no, he was just doing it to keep them away from the civilians." But it's like, no, he's jumping head first into the middle of them. He's
out
not
of
doing
like spite.
He's doing this. Yeah, he's doing this out of spite and for his own ego. And the fact is, that's what ultimately ends up being a problem. That he just ends up needlessly throws himself into needlessly does something stupid, usually for his own ego, ends up making the problem worse. And here's the thing: I ultimately am trying to figure out if this is a Sega mandate or a Flynn mandate, because the thing is, when it comes to if this is when it comes to Shadow's track record of how he's been written in the franchise up to this point, for the most part. Okay, I need to scroll off of that. That's like the first. That's like the first. I never thought it was possible they actually made Rouge look ugly for a second. But anyway, when it comes to when it comes to Shadow, he's always been in the same type of Vegeta. I'm going to be the angsty, super serious edgelord rival that you see in a lot of show and stuff, which is fine, fair enough.
But at least since Shadow the Hedgehog.
Totally. And outside of Shadow the Hedgehog, which I think we're all fine with at the very, and outside of Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic X Season 3, I can't think of any moment where he actively does things to actively make the plot worse. Yes, he is shown to be a loner, and yes, he is shown to be more aggressive than everyone else. But but from what I can tell, it seems like Flynn is the one that goes out of his way to frame it like he's actively doing things to make things worse. Like, some people try referencing the fact that, Team Sonic Racing, they had to be like super rivalry and combative, but it's like, it was a fun, silly racing game. Everyone was the whole joke of it was that everyone was being a rival and snarky towards one another. It's not like that was the whole point of the game, and that's not actually trying to have any serious stakes to it. That's the okay place to do it. And then you have Sonic Boom, which also ends up having him do something like this, but you can also argue that was for the joke. At least Sonic Boom, that was the joke. But here it's like, what is ultimately the benefit of doing this besides just needlessly having him get infected? And the worst part is, if you actually just took, it's still, the visuals ultimately end up working against it, but it's like, I don't even really necessarily get the point of doing this just beside of even introducing him or throwing into the story like this, other than just to show like, he's trying to be the angsty hero. Well, this is what happens when you try being super prideful all the time. It's just like, really, man, you really gonna do Shadow like that? Shadow's not even my favorite character, and even like, this is like the worst way you can kind of write him. And I've seen people try to defend it, saying like this is a Sega mandate, but it's like, even if you're going to try arguing that Sega does require Shadow to be more combative and more willing to be aggressive, and even likes to butt heads with Sonic, no other they don't actively have him do things in the story to make him worse, to make the plot worse, unless he's actively trying to be the protagonist. Unless they're actively trying to make him the antagonist. So I don't really get what the point of doing this here is, other than just to add to the body count.
Yeah, and I would say, here's something I would say. Here's like a workaround, because let's say I think there is a universe where you could keep this scene entirely the same. You wouldn't have to change a single thing. Here's what you have to do, though. You have to establish a consistency of Shadow's personality being enjoyable and also helpful. So, for example, there's I think of something like Yusuke Urameshi from Yu Yu Hakusho. Mm-hmm. His whole thing is like, he's like lucky in like the first couple arcs, like, and he barely takes his life seriously, and he just kind of wings it. Now that can be very bad, but the show presents it as very positive and very helpful until it wants to subvert your expectations and show the negative sides of it. But when it happens, you don't go, man, Yusuke, you're such an idiot for thinking you were all that, or thinking that you could get away with this. You go, oh man, your like luck's run out. Same thing with Shadow. You could have it be that he's this arrogant guy, but have it be that like, no, but he can back it up most of the time. Or like have a thing where Shadow fights 1,000 people, 1,000 robots, and it's just like, I can do it. If you set it up as a positive thing for a while, and then you look at this situation, you go, oh no, Shadow's he's gonna, oh no, and then when he does it, you're like, no, Shadow. It's consistent with the character, but that's where that argument of like, but it's in character doesn't really work, because if I don't enjoy what the character is, then I don't care if he's in character. It's annoying. But if you've set up a history of this behavior of Shadow being positive and good, then it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, sure, that's a bad behavior, but he's always in the situation where it would work. So now we've put Shadow in a situation where it wouldn't work, and now his personality comes to bite him. Whereas what we've been shown in the comic is just Shadow screws things up, and he gets put down by Sonic. through emotional manipulation by being like blackmail, like you would have killed people, but you're good now. So that's where I just want to make an argument to a viewer who might say like, well, it's in character. Well, you haven't made me like this characteristic of Shadow. You haven't made me like this version of Shadow to justify doing this to him. So that was just a point I wanted to make, just as like an interesting, like, well, maybe you don't have to change anything. You just have to add stuff. Do you agree with that idea, or do you think
100%? I'm kind of glad that you brought that up, because it was like that's the main defense I see a lot of when you end up criticizing a lot of the decisions that happen in the story by saying how stupid it is. People just say, "Well, it's in character," but it's like, yeah, do you really want this? And that's what I was talking about before, about how this is just, that's arguably worse, because now you're trying to take a character trait, but you're actually just using that character trait to make the story
like a negative,
just to make it a negative. But it's not done to actually challenge or explore the characters. This is the other reason why I'm not a big fan of the infection. And this is going to be a real problem when we get to issue 22, where it's like, yeah, the characters do something stupid and they get infected, but they're not learning from, but instead of it, but when it comes to quote unquote being punished, the whole idea here is that they're supposed to learn why the mistake was bad and ultimately grow from it. If, for example, Shadow ended up being this egotistical, and then let's say, I don't know if Rouge per se, but I don't know if it would necessarily work with Rouge, but let's say someone or other people ended up getting infected, and he ultimately realized how needlessly reckless and impulsive it was to pull that kind of stunt. That's a proper character challenge. But when you end up just having like, oh yeah, he ends up doing something stupid that gets him infected, it's like, oh goody, so now you just established that this character's an idiot and just wrote him out of the story. Good job. We definitely moved the plot with that.
Yeah, well, it's just not fun, you know, just even from an entertainment perspective. So yeah, I totally agree. Is there anything else to say about Shadow in that scene?
Not really.
Okay, because next they fight, right? It's like the Sonic fight Shadow chapter or issue.
Honestly, I don't think I'm trying to remember correctly, but I don't even think they fought that long.
Okay, because I know that's like the cover is like, you know, them fighting.
Yeah, like it's really like Sonic looked behind himself and like, oh no, are we gonna fight? And honestly, I don't even think let me look over this one more time, because I remember this fight being quick. Oh yeah, no, so Sonic they end up going for a couple of blows. Then the truck comes through. Shadow chases after the truck. They throw. Okay, so they do fight for a little bit, and they end up destroying Omega, and he ends up almost being overpowered. And then Silver comes in, psychokinesis everybody, and then they end up flying away.
Okay.
Then
we cut to Cream being a Chad and being so cool. And you're like, but it should be Sonic. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. But
no. This here's the thing. The individual when it comes to Cream's, I'm against Cream's inclusion, but when it comes to ultimately the scenes that she gets, there's a reason why both of us are agreeing she's the best character in the story, because she does have pretty decent character informing scenes. Like that's not actually working against her.
No, I get you. Yeah. I'm just messing with you.
Oh yeah, no problem.
So yeah, then, not much happens this one. It's mostly just he fights Shadow for a bit, Silver bails him out, and then he finds where all the Resistance people are, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I don't really think there's much of anything to talk about for this one, right?
Nope.
Has Starline started to be like, you're a big dumb idiot, Eggman, or is that later?
Oh no, that's this issue. This is when he actually starts researching and figuring out that there was another group of people that have electromagnetic powers that can control robots. A race of beings. Yes, why find a way to control millions when you can shepherd them all with just 6? And it's like, oh no. And this is where we get to stupid point number 6. And this is where we get to stupid point number 6. And this one's gonna be a long one. And and this is I'm gonna get actually I'm gonna get to this when we get to issue 26. But yeah, let's just go and say Starline gets stupid point number 6. So then we have issues 21, 22, and 23. All of these are supposed to happen at the same time. And I gotta be honest, I don't know why these 3 need to be separate issues.
Yeah, where they're all split up.
21, all it does is really just make me question, why the fuck are you guys not going after Eggman and Prick? Why are you guys not segmenting up some part of your group to go after the egg ship that's going around, literally dumping the virus into towns? Because you can do whatever you can to try to save civilians, which I'm not against, but at the end of the day, you kind of need to plug the plug hole.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't plug that, you're basically just taking water out of one room and then just pouring it into another. You gotta plug the leak. And the problem I have with and 21 just really just kind of brings it into the forefront, because we literally have the characters look at the ship, literally look at the ship, and if I remember correctly, I'm gonna go to this issue right now. We have them literally look at, let's see. They end up giving more exposition on how the virus works. They try having a JoJo. Yeah, they look direct at the beginning of the issue. I knew I didn't forget that. I knew I didn't make that up. So they're literally looking at the ship, and it's like, no, we need to handle the evacuation. We're not going to do anything to actually take the ship down. And it's like, really? Like that? Like you're just going to worry about just making, like, I'm not against saving civilians, but your priority should be stopping the plug hole. But whatever. Which is just, no. Let's go ahead and count that as stupid point number 7. Just everyone is it, like, just for everybody across the board, for no one thinking let's go after and stopping the ship except Tails, and he gets talked out of it. Then we get to so then we end up spending all this time. Then we end up spending time explaining what everyone's doing, and them going after and trying to stop the virus, stop saving as many civilians as possible, while Tails is trying to come up with the cure for it. Then we end up having Starline trying to talk the Deadly Six into working with him, which even the Deadly Six point out how dumb of a plan this is. And then we end up finding Silver comes in.
Which again, I was just gonna say, which again I'll say, I thought I didn't think it was gonna happen, but I hoped it was gonna be like lampshaded to where like he sort of knew what was going on, that they would try to betray him. But no, it's played straight. He's dumb. Which is bad for a character that I'm supposed to fear or think anything of, because now all I think of him as is just, because it's not even something to where you can be like, oh, he's like dumb, but like he's good at this thing, or like it's like a flaw. It's like, no, I guess his character is just that he's dumb, because he also thought that he should kill Sonic, and that like his idol wouldn't, be mad about that. So he's not even a good fanboy. So like it's very weird. I don't know what I'm supposed to be getting out of Starline.
Oh, he's Platypus Eggman. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Then we end up having Tails almost creating the virus, but dropping it. But then almost creating the antidote for the virus. And then when one of the bots break into his house, he ends up dropping it, and then ends up dropping the antidote. Which I'm just kind of sitting here going, did we really just dedicate an entire subplot in this story just to have for Tails to find the antidote, just to drop it?
Yeah, and I think this is a big thing for what Flynn was going for in terms of his, like, what we were talking about with, like, what does he consider, like, things happening all the time? And I think it really is just, like, let's make the characters as, like, miserable as possible. Because this really kind of does just feel like it's establishing the Zeddy stuff, and otherwise it's just, like, torture porn for, like, Tails.
I would argue tragedy forms are not, like...
Yes, tragedy. Yeah, you're right. And I'm not having fun with it, and I'm also not invested in it because I don't want them to succeed because I'm like, oh no, all these people. I'm just like, I wanted to succeed because I want this to be over. So it really just feels like, and I think it also comes with the fact that since they don't want to go too much into how he's creating it, because do they explain like what he's made that would allow for this? Like, is there any science behind it, or is it just the usual thing of like, Tails is smart? Ah, I finally did it. I was able to crack the code, but we don't know what is being lost by him doing that. It's just like, I cracked the code. I have a cure. Like, does he give any inclination of what he's learned about the virus that he should be able to fix it?
A little bit, but it doesn't end up it doesn't really end up coming into play anything later.
Okay, so that again, so it feels like another chapter where when you leave it, all you're going to be left with is, well, I guess we try again. Hooray! You know, like nobody loses anything of substantial value that I could be like, no. It's just like, okay, I guess we find another way to win.
Yeah,
okay,
like,
you know,
like for example, this is the issue where Tails ends up bringing back the Walker from Sonic Adventure 2 and then just blows it up, and it's like, oh no, that's a shame. But it's like, and then they try to have like this whole like really crying scene for like and they don't try to super play it, but they do try to have like Tails like, oh, thank you for your hard work. You just like the whole like inventor like really emotionally connecting with his invention. Yeah. And the thing is, as an engineer, I actually would respect that. I totally get that. But it comes off so half-assed because like I haven't seen this thing in almost 2 decades. Tails hasn't really thought about it or hasn't even really used it. Honestly, I don't think Flynn has even written about it before. And then we're supposed to have like this huge, like this whole like Tails is trying to have like this whole like touching moment about losing. And it's just like, oh, okay. And I'm like, okay, I know it's not fair to compare it to One Piece. Like that like One Piece is like, oh wait, you got through waters. You got through, you know about, okay, let me put it this way. You saw Frankie get grabbed by Robin, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I don't want to.
I'm at Thriller Bark.
Okay, so when it comes to, I know it would be unfair to compare it to the Going Merry funeral, but it's another thing. But even like in just like a smaller dose, like in comparison to something where it tries to play in a more comedic, like my Avatar, for example, Techie Coyote from Lunatics. There are several points in the story where he actually ends up blowing up something he cares for, and he actually does try to have like a really crying, sorry moment for it, and that it wasn't emotionally entailing, but that the whole point of that was it was just a joke. But that sticks with me a lot more than just this like 3 pages of him using the walker and then just him blowing it up. It just comes off just like, oh, we just, like I said before, it just comes off as tragedy. It just comes off as tragedy for him, but not even really well earned.
Yeah, and I would have even been fine with just like, because I've seen things where characters are invested in certain things and they're like crying about it, but I at the very least want to feel like, oh, that sucks. Like, dang it, like he liked that thing. Like that's what I want to feel. But I like, as far as I know, like when it appeared, I was just like, hey, that's a cool reference, and then it got destroyed as if in universe, like the story, like from what we had seen, he had been using it for a while, and that's just not the case. So it just kind of falls flat.
Yeah.
And like you say, they're not trying to like supersell it, but it's another case of a smaller problem that is persistent throughout the whole thing, to where it's just like, but I don't know anything about what this Tails feels about it. And as far as I can remember, was there any other point in the story where he's shown to be like really emotionally invested in the things he's created? So even then, it's just like, oh, I guess this is a part of Tails. Like that's the kind of the most you could get out of it. Mm-hmm. But so yeah, it's just just a small moment that kind of accentuates a bigger problem.
Yeah. So then ultimately at the end of the day, 21. You honestly could have just cut that out entirely, losing, or I'll talk about this at 23, but 21 ultimately just does not accomplish anything. 22 is where we really just do establish that this is just meant to be tragedy porn and not really anything else. Because then we get to stupid point number, I believe we're on 8 right now.
Yeah, I think that you're right.
Yeah, 8. So we have Vector who ends up walking in with now apparently captured Charmy in a glass ball, walks into the storage facility of where everyone else is, and it's like this kind of reminds me of what Flynn was doing back at at the beginning of Panic in the Sky, where it's like he's tempting, like he writes stories where the characters are tempting fate, but instead of that being the joke, it's literally just like, okay, let's set this up where where the obvious bad thing that's going to happen is going to happen, but instead of that being a joke, we're going to play this like this is actually serious, and it just ends up kind of just rolling through. It just ends up rolling through, and it just ends up just kind of rolling through with that. So then we end up having Vector to just kind of needlessly put everyone's lives in that storage facility in danger. Then we have Jimral, who ends up also, of course, even though he's supposed to be scanning and making sure everyone who is infected doesn't come in, of course,
like
people are still coming in.
Yeah.
Huh?
He missed the guy who was infected.
And then everyone else gets infected, which awesome. And then which perfect, and then everyone else gets infected, and then they have to do an emergency evacuation. And this is where and this is also just kind of a problem that I have, where I see people trying to make this seem like this is a super serious moment, and it's like this is so not earned. Where Amy ends up saving Cream and letting Vanilla end up getting infected, and I feel like this would work a lot better, or would have some type of punch to it, if Amy was trying to be some ideologue, or if it just doesn't really seem to have any punch for who this character is. It's just her making a really kind of not a decision that ultimately is the greater good, but ultimately a decision that's not going to make her feel good by the end of it. And it's like, oh, she ended up sacrificing Vanilla to save Cream, and it's like, okay, it's like the aesthetic of being dark, but no real substance to how it's supposed to really challenge or reflect on the character. It's just kind of a moment that ends up happening. Amy ends up having a couple of tears about it, and then just moves on. And it's like,
yeah, the point is, hey, you like Amy, right? Isn't it cool that she did that? But like, I don't know this Amy.
Yeah.
So yeah, which I think is a lot of where a lot of the conflict comes from, where it's just like, it's like, hey, it's this character, they're doing a thing. Don't you feel it? But it's like, but I don't know this one, like this version of that character. So yeah, so it just kind of falls flat. She's like, oh, Amy rescued Vanilla, but I don't know how Amy feels about Cream. As far as I know, didn't they just talk in this issue where Cream comes in and gives her like coffee or whatever? Isn't that the first time they've talked in this story?
Yeah.
So yeah, it just kind of feels like it's like, oh, I guess we did that. Neat.
Yeah.
So yeah. That's about it for that one, right?
Vector ends up getting infected, and SP, and again, it goes back to the same problem I was talking about with Shadow. Yeah, he made the dumb decision, and he's getting the punishment, but he's not the one ultimately dealing with the consequences from it, nor learning from it. Again, it's just kind of another character just being an idiot to keep the plot going. So yeah, we have stupid point 8 and stupid point 9. Then we have Sonic the Hedgehog 23, and
okay, yeah, you have a lot to say for this one, right?
Not. Let's find out. So we end up going to this one issue, and then where Sonic's running around, and then he ends up finding Eggman. Eggman is testing the virus, because, as we established, I believe, in issue 18, the virus is not, because the thing is about this is that, and the reason why Eggman comes off as such as so incompetent is because he ended up releasing the virus without making sure that it wouldn't mutate, or or testing it to make sure that it doesn't mutate or have any problems. And now we're at issue 23, where he has a whole town sectioned off, and he's trying to test it to make sure that he can actually get the virus under his control again. And he's now finally butting heads with Starline. So Sonic ends up coming in, and he tries giving him one last talk about like, hey, you remember being Tinker? And it's like, are you fucking serious right now? Like, this isn't Boom. This is supposed to be after Forces. This is literally this man's second apocalypse. Are you really right now trying to give him the talk no jutsu speech right now?
Right. Yeah.
And then
it really just kind of comes off as Sonic trying to just justify himself rather than
like try to actually reach out to Eggman, just be like, come on, man, please tell me I made the right decision. Just a little bit. So, yeah.
And then that ends up happening. Then they end up like Eggman. They exchange conversations a little bit. Then Sonic ends up getting into a fight with them. Getting into a fight with Eggman. All three of them end up falling into the pit, and then they find out that Eggman's voice still does work on the Zombots. And now that I'm going down the list, I'm not entirely sure how that's going to be effective at this point. But whatever.
Yeah.
It might come back in issue 31, but I'll talk about that later. When it comes to, and then he ends up finding out the Zombot, his voice when he talks to them directly still works, and then they all just kind of go their separate. Then Starline and Eggman end up teleporting away. Then Sonic ends up running the other direction, breaking the scanner that Tails ended up developing for him. So it's like, yeah, this 3-parter moved nothing forward besides adding to the body count. Joy.
Yeah.
So it's like
22. Huh? Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
22 honestly should have just been the one issue, and you condense it down. And instead of trying to rely on Vector being the problem, you could have easily either... I don't even know, because for the most part, 23 is probably the one that's the most substantive for Sonic's character. But to be quite honest, I don't think that needed an entire issue to have. That did not need an entire issue to have, or at the very least, it ultimately didn't really, especially since it doesn't really seem like this is actually meant to be challenging or actually trying to explore anything about Sonic's character besides him just kind of coming to terms that Eggman is now bad now, because that was a question at some point. 22 is the one that ends up adding to the body count, but ultimately doesn't move anything forward. But besides that, doesn't really amount to much. And 21 does nothing to move the story forward. So it's just kind of like we have a really boring one, a really needlessly mean-spirited one, and then just a kind of a the thing that we brought, the potential question that we ended up bringing up in issue 5 ultimately ends up not being a thing. Shocker. So it just kind of feels like this 3-parter really was not necessary, or that ultimately there was no reason for this to really be a 3-parter. At best, 21 is the one that needs to be cut, and at worst, they probably should have found some way to combine 22 and 23, because these two don't really need to be a thing.
Yeah, and again, you can have tragedy. Like it's not a matter of like, ugh, I don't want to feel sad. It's the problem that I don't feel sad. I just feel like you're trying to tell me to be sad, or you're trying to tell me like, or you're trying to show me just horrible things and just like get a reaction out of me, and it doesn't feel earned. And so that's where that becomes a problem.
Yeah. And speaking of that, and I actually kind of noticed this as I kind of went back through, that's always kind of been Flynn's MO. He doesn't really like whenever he tries telling stories like that, it's a really bad habit of his is that he likes just telling stories where just all of the bad things just kind of happen, but not really for any particular point. It's just like, oh yeah, bad things happen because bad things kind of happen. Like Other M was kind of like this. The Mel Sally arc was kind of like this. Most of the reboot Archie was. And that ultimately ends up happening for both of these arcs too. And I'm not against tragedy, but if you're going to go ahead and try to be tragic, at the very least, if you're not doing something with the characters, at least try to explore something or do something for the material to the very least give me something to work with as information. And at the very least, do something in story where it seems like the tragedy is actually earned or justified in story. But it just seems like you're just adding to the loss count for the sake of adding to the loss count.
Yeah. Which it just isn't enjoyable, because I feel like instead of being invested in the characters, I'm being emotionally manipulated by the characters. And then a poor job of it too, because I don't care about them.
Right.
So it just seems like you're just showing me horrible things happening. And I don't want that unless I care. So yeah. Or unless you're trying to say something and you're trying to engage with me on that level. But yeah. So next issue, this one's the Tangle one, right?
Yes. And I have, and this is the one, not necessarily pissed me off, but this is the one that just kind of really just kind of let me know that Flynn does not have any substance to himself as a writer. And I know that sounds harsh, but this is the one that just kind of let me do that, because the thing is, as we've been talking about through this entire arc, as we've been talking about in passing throughout this entire arc, is that there are so many ways that you can either try to get something for Sonic to do, or to try to challenge him in some particular way, or to try to make it at the very least some amount of some amount of character growth. But the problem here is that this issue ultimately ends up undercutting that, because the only other character, because the issue starts out with Sonic and Tails ultimately relaying that both of their devices, both of their plans for trying to figure out how the virus worked ended up failing. Then SBO ends up trying to chew him out, but chew him out for like how bad of a decision it was to just let Eggman go. Which, one, Shadow gets to make that argument because he's the one he was the one who's actively making that position. SBO wasn't, so it seems like he was just taking the most cynical character there to make that point. And that ends up being underdone. And I've even seen this with IDW fans who tried defending this scene, because they end up saying like it's okay because, oh yeah, SBO is lashing out, but by that point, by saying lashing out, you're arguing that it's not substantive, and that ends up being enforced by the fact that later in the issue, when we end up finding out that Tangle, someone who is affected, someone directly negatively impacted by Sonic's decision to keep Eggman free, she decides to say, "No, everything you did was okay. You just gotta keep moving forward and doing what you're doing," pretty much alleviating him of all guilt.
Yeah. At least setting his mind at ease in a moment where it probably would make more sense to kind of, if you're gonna torture anybody, you probably should get Sonic to at least at some point fully embrace the concept that he screwed up. Right. And these kind of people sort of being okay with it just can kind of keep giving setbacks to that development, I feel like.
Oh, it does. And then we get to Whisper, and this is so weird to me, because when I saw the previews and the clips of this going in, I was like, okay, I feel okay. I know this is probably gonna be crap, but this is probably gonna be the scene that is gonna get me to like feel super sorry for Whisper. And I'm gonna end up having to give it points on that alone. And then I read it, and I'm just kind of like, oh, that happened. I guess I was surprised at how little that affected me, to be honest. Because I know, like, I already know from the database level that the only reason that this was going to end up having any type of impact is because Tangle's like the first person Whisper really gave a chance to be emotionally invested with. Now, maybe if I read the Tangle and Whisper subplot, really read that 4-parter, maybe I could have gotten more out of it. But when I end up reading it, I'm just kind of like, oh. But when I end up getting to that point, it's just like, oh, she's crying over her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, I will say, Adam Bryce Thomas, because he did this one too. He sells the crap out of it. Oh, yeah, I get you. You're talking about from a writing perspective, but I'm just saying that again, if there's a chapter that I'm like, well, you could at least just like look at it, and you could probably get more out of it just from like if you knew nothing about like Tangle and Whisper, just from like the art, I feel like it could sell it better to you. Because he does a really good job.
Oh yeah, no. That, like I said before, I thought that was going to hit me when I saw that in context. But honestly, what my thought of how this was going to hit me was more effective than what ultimately I read. It was drawn fantastically. I can't say. Well, I have been critical of how the series has been doing action set pieces. Art, when it comes to art direction in general, it does it spectacularly.
Yeah, and this chapter, this issue especially, had like really dark lighting, really like dark shading on people. There was a lot of silent panels where like nobody's saying anything. Like I think this is the chapter that really makes you feel the the depression of it all. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that again, since I don't really care too much about Tangle, but I do care that Whisper cares, and so at least a little bit of that emotion comes through from the writing, and then the images just sell it for me. Mm-hmm. So not necessarily like a good on Flynn, but just more of like good on the concept and good on Adam Bryce Thomas for just selling it like so well. So, but I get you. All right, we're almost caught up. We're on 25, right?
Yeah, and this is going to be one of 2 fillers. And this is, while 23 really just kind of really just told me that Flynn doesn't really have much in terms of, really 23 and 24. 25 is ultimately just kind of the one where I'm just like, wow, you are really trying to make sure that this has absolutely no punch or any effect on his character, huh? because we end up getting to this issue, and it's following up from issue 24 where Starline stupidly ends up drafting the Deadly Six. Remember that stupid point again? And he ends up thinking, oh yeah, I'm just going to use this horn and I'm going to be able to control them. And it's like, oh wait, I'm only going to be able to control them if I can consistently use the horn outside of their reach. And it's like, when you make Lost World look good by comparison, you know you're doing something wrong. And
Right.
that's going to become more apparent as we keep going. And we end up getting to the point, and then they end up just beating them up, taking control over Metal Sonic, and before they can end up attacking, they end up just kind of fucking off and then just going back to Angel Island, where everyone else. Which, okay, I can probably nitpick about that, but fine. We just need to keep the plot going. And then they end up getting to Angel Island, and then Amy, who, I gotta be honest, you think with how visceral and how dark this arc has been, you think that would be the issue where you think like them coming across the person that was directly responsible with all this crap, you think that there would be a lot more visceral hatred towards him. But the thing is, even in that one frame where Amy ends up seeing, where Amy is supposed to, like that whole like glint eye thing, that's what you do when you're trying to play up something funny, violent is supposed to happen. But they end up. But the thing is, it's like this should be a moment where it's supposed to be like super serious, but they keep trying but that's something that ends up kind of just taking the dramatic effect out of it. And then they end up having Sonic come over and say like, "You're gonna tell us what we need to do, and if you don't do that, I'll affect you myself." And he ends up telling us and Eggman ends up telling us a bunch of things about the virus. But the problem is, one, he doesn't tell them anything that's ultimately necessary or anything that, as we find out later, Rouge has been on the ship the entire time, at least since issue 20, at least since issue 21, and she's been on the ship this entire time. So he doesn't tell them anything necessary. He doesn't tell them anything that she couldn't. And secondly, why the hell is he still walking around? And why the hell is he still walking around being treated like he can just kind of be his own thing? And this is where, if they were going to have this whole arc about establishing that, if they were going to have this whole thing about like, again, where it just seems like they are establishing that Sonic is just supposed to, well, like Flynn is just, let me rewind, sorry about that. Where Flynn is just trying to keep to the status quo that Sonic and Eggman was going to be to each other and can never really do anything that's really going to change that long term or have some be directly impactful and actually do anything to change that dynamic. So instead of him doing the smart thing, which was at the bare minimum, putting him under lock and key and actually wrap him up, because there was no reason for him to be walking around other than that. There's no other reason for him to be walking around, and that would be a good way to show that Sonic is taking the situation seriously. But instead, it's just kind of him just kind of walking around, just telling them a bunch of things that either aren't necessary or things that Rouge could have easily told them in the first place. Then we end up
just being allowed to gloat at all. Yeah.
And then we end up having Starline talk about, no, we're going to do something to try to take it back. And then it's like, then Starline finally ends up coming to the point in his arc where he's like, no, I'm going to do something we can so we can fulfill your mission you're giving up to so quickly. He ends up creating a portal, and then Metal comes over, grabs him, they steal the jewel off of his hand, and they just throw him off into the portal. And then Tails says like, is that okay? And it's like, you know what, why? And they try to play it off like he's trying to be super cynical and tired about everything that happens, but it's like, you're allowing the other guy who let this go to just teleport back to probably somewhere where he actually has some type of lapse where he can actually do something actually effective. You're still making the same mistakes.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's just this weird double standard with Eggman. It just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. And it just constantly feels like again, if this were maybe more of a comedic series, then you could just allow it because it'd be like that, kind of like that Ice King thing that you talked about, where it's just like, yeah, but everyone just kind of treats him like a joke. So, but it's like, no, man, like, can someone like restrain him at least? Like, can he not like be allowed to like do all his crazy mannerisms? Like, at least handcuff him, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it just, I don't know, it just feels like they're not taking him seriously, which is the problem. Like, I'd even be fine if you just have like Knuckles is just like behind him all the time. So like just like with like fist ready, like I will knock him out the second he tries anything, like anything. But just the way they just kind of lackadaisically just hang out with him, it just feels really weird. I like the Raymond whisper scene. I know you have some problems with it with the things you've established in terms of just like, I don't really care about Tangle. Cream, being the one who has to be tortured is kind of unnecessary. But if we're gonna torture him and if we're gonna have Whisper be sad, I think the scene's very, very good.
Okay, so the thing is, if I look at the scene in a vacuum, it is fine. I actually don't really have much to really argue. I don't really have much in terms of argue about it directly. My problem here is that when I take into consideration of the context of everything else that we already know about Eggman, about the fact that he does nothing substantive. I mean, that he doesn't give them anything else substantive. He just literally calls his second apocalypse and arguably second genocide. And we're using the youngest kid character to try to the youngest cute character basically to manipulate us into thinking the fact that his life is still valuable, even though we've just kind of established that it's not on any front. In a vacuum, it's fine, but with that context, it just kind of comes off as it's just trying to downplay why we can't do anything directly with them. Which, when you take into consideration what happened, he should have gotten sniped. Whisper should have just taken the shot and sniped his ass right there. So
yeah, and I understand that. I'm just taking my small victories anywhere I can.
Take it. Like I said, it's fine. The scene is fine in a vacuum. It's when I take that context, it just ruins the whole thing for me.
I get it.
Does anything else happen in 25?
I think it ends with
the Deadly Six are setting up their own camps about like, oh yeah, we're going to use the Chaos Emeralds to control the Zombots and make them do our bidding, and now we each
which again just kind of equivalates to more padding.
Yeah.
Things are worse. Be sad. Or be excited, maybe? I don't know. Are there anyone does anyone like the Deadly Six? Do they have fans?
No. I've seen like
aren't
two
they
people
universally disliked?
Huh?
I said, aren't they universally disliked?
Yeah. And here's the thing. Let me go and bring this up now. If you were going to go ahead and commit to Eggman doing all this crap, I don't really get the point of bringing the Deadly Six, other than their powers are about controlling people, about controlling metal, about controlling robots. Oh, they're kind of robots. What if we bring them in as the final boss? And I gotta be honest, this is I know it's kind of topical and I know it gets beat to death, but this honestly does have the stink of Rise of Skywalker, where it's like, oh yeah, we need to have the villain and the protagonist have some interaction, but we still need to have a big bad. Oh, I know, let's draft in this other person that's had nothing to do with the story up to this point, and then bring them in as the actual final boss. But instead of it being Palpatine, who, if the story was structured properly, that actually would have been a good final threat. He started this whole mess. The story ends with him. But here, it's like if if in the Rise of Skywalker, instead of drafting Palpatine as the final boss, they drafted Jabba the Hutt. And it's like, why? Like, they have nothing to do with the story. No one likes them. They're incredible. They're incredibly easy fodder, and they don't really have the same type of visceral antagonism that they would have had towards Eggman and take him down. You are literally taking out the person who's at least somewhat relevant, who's at least somewhat functional as a villain, even as with the dumb concept they placed behind him of not understanding his own virus, which is another problem in and of itself. But now you're drafting in a completely new villain who's actually even less effective, less intimidating, and who's less effective, has less of a rivalry between the two. For what? Exactly. Just to make sure that everyone gets their own individual fights? And okay, I'll get to the issue of that in 27, but it's just like, why bring these guys in now? And to go back to what I was talking about with Starline, let's think about everything he's done from issue after getting Eggman back to normal. What has he ultimately done?
Basically either praised Eggman or not praised him and then pulled a shadow and just made things unnecessarily worse.
Which brings me to the question of why is Starline here? Like, really, honestly and truly, like the Tinker subplot is already bad enough, and then, honestly, that could have been solved if you just had Eggman come across. If you just had Metal come across Eggman in the town when he's separated by himself, you're done. You don't even need that whole little like scene of him trying to reprogram his brain. So he doesn't even do that very well. So he doesn't even do that well. So then we spend the rest of this whole arc about him realizing that, oh, Eggman is actually a horrible guy to work, is actually a pretty awful boss, and I should work for him even if I do like his vision. And then we get to issue 25 and he just ends up getting kicked out of the plot. And it's like, really? We just needed him so we can have the gemstone here?
Yeah.
The teleportation gemstone here? Like, really?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, plot devices aren't inherently bad, and having a frivolous character I don't think is even bad. But just, again, if I'm going back from just like if I'm just like some reader, what am I supposed to feel when that happens? Am I supposed to feel like, yeah, screw that guy? Or am I supposed to feel like, oh no, Starline, he had his intentions, no? Or am I supposed to relate to the fact that he's like, don't meet your heroes? Like, what am I supposed to get from Starline other than finally we're done with whatever it was? And I don't think that was Flynn's intention. I don't think he wanted me to look at Starline and perpetually go, what are you doing here? So it's just like, even from, regardless of if it's something like he's like a plot device or he's like just this frivolous character we throw away, there wasn't even anything enjoyable to get out of him because his personality just relegated to either I was into Eggman or I'm more into the idea of Eggman and I want to bring that out. Yeah. But we don't know why. He doesn't do anything that extreme other than like petty backstabbing. And he's not smart enough for the backstabbing to even come across as like, ooh, okay, you're a backstabber. He just does it like an idiot. So again, there's just not much to him.
Yeah.
We could probably do 26 and 27 together because it's just them finding the Zeddy, right? Or no, sorry. Okay. 27
well, no, you're basically right. I just want to make a little note of 26 because there's not much to talk about. It's basically another setup issue. I'm not even totally sure we need to dedicate a whole issue to this because it's basically about them saying who's going to take what, where everyone's going to go, and then spending the second half showing everyone go to their particular, all the teams breaking up and going to their particular Zeddy. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. And now we're caught up. Final chapter or final issue, and they take out a few of them.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have. That's okay. No, I'll talk about 28 in a sec. So when it comes to 27, Amy. So we have two particular fights. We have Cream and General versus Xena, and then we have Tails and Amy versus Zama. Here's the thing. I've talked about this before, but I find the Cream and General thing to easily be one of Flynn's best action scenes that he's ever written. It's also, but the thing is, it's painfully mediocre by any other story, but I find it so fascinating because at the very least, it seems like Flynn was trying to give some substance to it. Because almost every other time he does a fight scene like this, they end up like Tails and Amy's fight scene, where it's just, they deal with the problem. They come up with the solution to the problem. Solution works. They move on. Like there's no real character. Like you can honestly swap out Tails and Amy with any two characters. They don't even do anything that's specific to who they are as individual characters. And it ultimately just doesn't matter by the end. By the end of it, it's just that happened, I guess.
Yeah, with the Cream and General one, there's like an emotional through line.
Yeah. It's not the best. Here's the thing. I still want to criticize, but let's talk about the positive. Since we spent most of this being critical, let's give the positives here where they deserve it, because I do think this actually deserves some praise. So first off, it actually does try to build off the fact. It actually does try to utilize the fact that Cream and General do have some type of emotional connection to one another that has been set up in at least 3 issues before this.
Yeah, and they've had some cute interactions of like Cream trying to get the robot to lighten up, and he's like staunchly for like protecting Cream. And so it's not like they don't have like a dynamic that like combats each other. It's just more like they're trying to meet in the middle, but just the way that they both do it is like completely sincere, but it's just like, man, it sure is, you know, funny that he like tries to care, but he does it in his robotic way. And she tries to get him to like come out of his shell, but he's a robot, you know, stuff like that works really well.
Totally. When it comes to the fight with actually trying to beat Xena, there's actually some type of utilization of battle mechanics, such as them actually trying to grab onto her strands that were controlling their electromagnetic strands that were actually controlling Gemerald, and actually trying to use that against her. You got anything else?
No, not really. It's more, you know, it's more tragedy porn for Cream, which, you know, in isolation I like, but I understand your criticisms. But it's just basically, I mean, any criticisms for that aspect we've talked to death about, because they infect her, and so it's like, you know, it's like real, it's like, yeah, the innocent child is dead, so.
Yeah. Okay. So, hold on. But what do I really want to get into? There is one thing in particular that I genuinely do need to get back into writing this, but the one issue that I ended up having with it was the whole. It does kind of build up the Cream tragedy porn aspect, but this is what ends up bothering. But this scene only just kind of puts it into perspective, and honestly, what ends up genuinely bothering me about this. One of the excuses Flynn has had when it comes to writing Cream, both in the pre-boot and the reboot, is that Cream is either too fragile or too innocent or too young to really be involved into the fight scenes. And the problem I have with that whole scene where she ends up kind of saying, "Oh no, I'm just going to cover my eyes and everything's going to be okay," it does go into tragedy porn, but it also feeds into this weird mindset and something I'm not a big fan of in the franchise, where it just kind of puts her off to the side and doesn't allow her to as a throne because she's too young to really be participating in anything. And it's like, I get the idea of trying to be more confronting to the fact of like, oh yeah, when you're putting kids in this type of like super serious environment, it's actually really tragic and it's really sad when it happens. And I get that, but it's like, we're dealing with a bunch of cartoon animals. None of them, besides Rouge, and that's a barely, none of them are above the age of 18. All of them are meant to be some type of fighters and from in some particular way. And even if you want to try arguing that Cream is more pacifist or doesn't really like fighting, when you end up crafting this whole situation where she's either too naive or too innocent to fight, it just puts in the audience's mind that she should not be participating in the story. And when you're in an action adventure story and you're basically saying you don't want her to participate action adventure, you're basically writing her out of the story.
Yeah, so you might as well just alter it and just have nobody talk about it, because nobody's going to question it in the same way that nobody's going to question the other ludicrous things about Sonic.
Like, for example,
you know, it's a part of the suspension of disbelief.
Right. Like, I don't even need to go that far. Look at Tails and Charmy. Tails is 8 and Charmy is also 6. No one's having this conversation. No one is having the conversation about their age with them because it's not brought up with them. Besides them just being shorter, they are pretty much treated with the same agency as everyone else. But Cream, Flynn feels the need to really play into that fact and really play into the fact that she's younger. And that's what ends up bothering me so much about this. Because instead of allowing her to have her own character conflict, and really finding her own sense of agency and place in the narrative, the story just kind of leans on the fact that she is the cute one. She's the puppy, and the fact is that you're not really supposed to think of her as like an actual independent character, an actual like active character in the plot who could be regularly working in the story. You're supposed to see her as the sweet, innocent, precious one who should be protected and never allowed to actually put into the story. So if anything, I see this as Flynn kind of coming back around and trying to argue, see, this is why she can't really be in fight. This is why she really should be in fight. See, she's too innocent and pure for them. And it's like, awesome, man. And it's like, I've had my own issues when it comes to bringing in Cream, but that's all because I'm not entirely sure what fighting style she should have. But I don't want to exclude her because, oh, she's too innocent and pure, because it's like, you're basically right. It's an action story. Adding that kind of concept to the story like this, you might as well just write her out.
Right, and people like Cream, so just keep her. Just
Yeah.
make her, just give her something, just don't acknowledge it. Am I supposed to be thinking about, like, why is Charmy allowed to work? Here's a question. Where are all their parents? Like, are they all orphans? What are the child labor laws for Charmy B? Like, these are the ridiculous questions that you don't need to ask. And it goes along with, like, oh man, does anyone think about the fact that, like, Cream's like a little kid? Like, how would that affect her mentally? It's like, no, why are we bothering with that? So yeah,
Right,
it's
and
just
the thing is,
it goes into the pile of Flynn creating unnecessary conflicts and then kind of not doing too much with them, other than, I guess, just again going for the tragedy angle of just like, see. So yeah, so I guess in this instance he had a point if that is what he was going for, but it just seems counterintuitive to the type of story you're trying to tell.
right. So then I could talk a little bit about Gemerald's arc, but honestly, it's just more the fact that if Flynn was trying to make that an arc, it was a non-arc. The whole
I know he
thing
talked about how Sega did specifically say that they would like him to be more robotic and have a little less of his personality, but I think he said that when writing this newest issue that they did give him a little more leeway, because you can tell he has a bit more personality. So that is something that we can confirm in terms of, like, if you found him kind of boring before, that he has stated, like, I did try to make him as interesting as I could be, but Sega seems to want him to be a little more robotic.
Honestly, that wasn't the problem. Honestly, I thought, like I said, like if I had to put a ranking, Gemerald's easily 3. Is easily the third best character in the story. Like, that's not like,
yeah, I like him.
Yeah, he's fine. My issue here was just more if he was trying to give him like something resembling an arc about like how he needs to be more forgiving of people who end up getting infected versus how he was like treating Sonic and others before, and now with Cream infected, he's not doing that. I don't think that counts because we've been pretty much establishing throughout this entire story. Cream is literally his bypass character. This is like the one place where he will absolutely like bypass like all of his like rational responses to give her a pass to. So it's like it doesn't really work as an arc because we've pretty much established that he will do like he pretty much does. I don't want to say does what Cream wants, but more or less Cream is his soft spot. So I don't mind Gemerald. Ultimately what happens with what he does in this arc. It's just I hope Flynn wasn't thinking that was a character arc because that does not count as an arc or even a change in worldview.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it was because I feel like if he would just have Gemerald say something like, just maybe say something equivalent. So I would assume it's just supposed to be the moment and that's it.
Okay, so if that's it, it's fine.
Because I feel like he would have Gemerald say something like you would either have Cream be like, you'd have Cream say something like maybe like well, I guess you have to leave me, and then him maybe say something to the effect of like, you've always taught me that it's important to value others, something like that. But he didn't do that, so I just assume it's just staying consistent with the fact that he loves Cream. So I wouldn't count it too much as a flaw.
Oh no! Oh, it's more about it. No, like what he does for Cream is fine. It was really okay. At the end of the day, we're basically agreeing it's not really an arc, which is totally fine. At the end of the day, my problem is
you're just speculating.
Yeah, which
okay.
if it's not, it's fine. If it's not, it's fine. The only thing I can really criticize about the ending is really just, did we really need to infect the child? Did we really need to infect the 6-year-old?
Yeah,
I get you. Yeah. All right. And is that it? Are we caught up?
I do kind of want to talk about the cover art for 28, because this one makes me a little hesitant. But let me pull this up really quickly, because I'm looking at it right now, and all it shows, like I'm comparing this to 27, because 27, like this. Okay, this is 100% speculation for your audience. So right now we have. Okay, so we have 4 issues. Okay, so right now we have 3-ish issues left. We have issue 28, issue 29, And then issue 30 is going to be they're supposed to be like part 3 and part 4. Then issue 30 is going to be essentially the epilogue for everything. And then issue 31. Oh wait, no, issue 31 is going to be the actual epilogue. They're trying to be coy about what issue 30 is supposed to be. But anyway, the reason why I bring this up, the reason why I bring up issue 28 was because I was looking at the cover art for it. So it looks like we're going to have two different. So instead of trying to do what they did in issue 28, where in issue 27, where they had Tails, Cream, Amy, and Gemerald all on the same poster with Xena and Zaman. Issue 28 has them split up. So it has SBO and the purple one, I don't remember his name. And then we have Whisper and Silver on the art on cover B, looking at all the other, with the seemingly staring up at the other at all the Deadly Six. And I was just kind of interested if they were like how this is ultimately going to go down, because right now we have right now we at the bare minimum have 3 fights we ultimately have to go through. So we have Sonic, and so we have Silver and Whisper versus their Zeddy. Then we have SBO versus his Zeddy. And finally, we have Eggman and Sonic and potentially Rouge versus probably not Rouge. She's probably just gonna get the last one, the last Emerald, and it's gonna be them going against Zavok. And I'm just kind of curious as to because the thing is, when it comes to Flynn, he finds new ways for me to go, I had no expectations, yet you somehow found a way to go underneath them. Because he finds ways to just completely anti-climax whatever story he was going for. And I'm like, you have 3 fights, arguably 3 issues left, and he's trying to be super coy about what issue 30 is going to be about. How do you think this is going to go down?
How this is going to end?
Yeah.
I think we're definitely going to go with their plan of using Supersonic in some way. That just kind of seems to be the way to go about it. But also, as silly as it sounds, I do wonder if they're going to use Chaos Control to rewrite this whole situation. To go back in time. Because otherwise, I guess we'll just have to assume that society gets better. But otherwise, I don't know. I don't really know what the climax could be in terms of making it big and grand. It's just we fix it and then we go around and try to fix everybody else. But it would seem to make more sense if something really big happened.
But otherwise, I really just have no expectations for it being good. Definitely.
And as far as Eggman, I guess if they really wanted to surprise me, they would just arrest him, and it would be the culmination of, I guess, whatever Sonic's arc is supposed to be, where it's just no, we're stopping you now, we're putting you away, done. And then if Flynn wants to, maybe he will start introducing new characters, or new villains, but I highly doubt it. I'm going to assume that Eggman will just get away, and we'll deal with him another day.
Want spoilers?
Go for it.
Issues 31 and 32 are supposed to be about Eggman's plan about basically leading a new assault. It definitely issue 32, because issue 32 says, with the chaos of the recent past events fresh in everyone's minds, Dr. Eggman launches a new assault determined to take down his enemies once and for all. And guess what the robot is piloting?
Omega?
Yep.
Well,
it's I'm not even mad. I'm just disappointed.
I don't even know if I'm that. I think I'm just done.
Okay, so what would you
once and for all? For real this time, guys.
Okay, so here's some general thoughts I have about Flynn. The reason why I think the reason why I just kind of still read his stuff is not because I find him to be good. I don't. I find his stuff is mediocre at best to outright "what are you doing?" and outright confusing and downright insane or downright not really insane because that's downright either confusing and bland and worse. But I find his writing to be fascinating because it's almost like every bad decision, or it's either he makes every bad decision possible you can do in this type of story, or he'll find ways to underwrite that shouldn't be possible. Um, a good example of when I was breaking this down, because I can kind of do it here, but I think the best example of this was when I was reading in the reboot, and it was the issue where Sonic and Rotor are trying to fight at this like snowy location, and they end up willingly letting themselves get captured. And then they end up finding out that Rotor's dad, Tundra, was the one running it, and he ends up finding out that you're an egg boss. And Tundra and Rotor ends up finding out that his dad's an egg boss, and then Tundra taunts him for a little bit, throws him into a prison. Then Sonic ends up going full werehog, and then just breaks them out, and then gets the two people that they were supposed to save, and then the story's over. The problem, I kept reading that over and over again, and I couldn't figure out why this just felt so weak, because you can think of other stories like this where someone ends up finding out that it's their dad, and like their dad is like on the opposite side of the world, a war of some conflict, and it's like, oh my god, this is really tragic. And I was just like, why do I not feel a damn thing about this? And then I even got to the point of bringing in a couple of my friends. All of them had different experiences with Sonic. Some of them were huge fans. Some of them didn't give a shit. But the one thing that all five of us had in common is that we also, like Rotor, had abusive fathers. And it was like, okay, if this is one issue that we should be able to absolutely have some type of emotional connection to, it should be this. We all read it, and we had the exact same reaction. Well, that happened, I guess. And then you start breaking down, and then when you start looking at it, you just start like, wow, that's the reason why. And then you just kind of start, when I started rereading it again, and it was like, wait, that's why that didn't work. One, we don't establish anything, like, even ignoring past issues, which barely do anything for this, Rotor doesn't get any type of character establishing moments to really give us a reason to give a shit or even like him in this issue. When we end up getting to Tundra, we know next to nothing about Tundra other than just he's a bad guy. Then when they end up trying to establish what their relationship is like, all it is just Tundra ripping at the most basic and underwritten parts of basic and top level stuff of who Rotor is as a character. And then when you end up getting to the end, Rotor doesn't even really care. And when you end up realizing that Tundra was supposed to be set up to be Rotor's rival, and it's like, you didn't do anything to establish them as rivals. It's so by the books, but not really thinking about what is supposed to make this effective. Like, hey, making someone's father be on the opposite side of a conflict, that could be some really decent drama. But they don't establish what their relationship is like. They don't really establish any reason for them to butt heads. They don't establish their contrasts other than them being on opposite sides of the war. They're just kind of, oh yeah, his dad's on the other side. This is like really traumatic for Rotor, even though even Rotor doesn't give a shit. And you just kind of get to the end, it's just like, well, that happened because the story doesn't give you a reason to give a shit.
Yeah, and
like,
oh, sorry, you can go on.
Oh no, you go ahead.
I was going to say a really easy way to fix that, again, would just be give Rotor the trait of the naive optimist, to where he believes in the good in everybody. Like, he's someone who, like, maybe he's like, yeah, like I don't have a family. Like, maybe he thinks his dad's dead. Like he's like, yeah, I don't have a family because of Eggman. Yeah, he'd just be like, yeah, because of Eggman during the war, I lost my family, but like we were just a couple of kids and we won. And he could be the guy who's like, he's like, whenever we were doing it, I never thought we could actually win. But seeing all my friends work together, like, no, that's made me a true believer. We can do anything, and I believe that there's good in the world. That's all you have to do. And then as soon as you establish, oh, my dad's not part of that good in the world, and he can give his generic, like what would be generic, like, no, Dad, like, come on, like, there's got to be something good in you. You're just working for Eggman because he's making you, right? And it's like, no, I'm doing it for power and because you're a weakling. Boom! Instantly, you'd feel bad for Rotor because you'd be like, dang, you're not only did you not know this guy was alive, you have this worldview that he is completely diametrically against, and now you have to deal with it. Dang, Rotor, that sucks, man. Even if I don't feel bad, even if I'm not like, oh, no, Rotor, it's that feeling that I was talking about with Tails, where I'm like, dude, that sucks, man. Like, that's what I want to feel. So there's just a lot of really easy ways you can do it without even having to establish their relationship or dynamic. He can just exist as the exact opposite of what Rotor believes in. Because his dad went to work for Eggman. He submitted. He did give up basically, and he got something out of it. Whereas Rotor, while he didn't believe in much at all, he still had his friends who proved to him that yes, good will win in the end, and people who want to do good will choose that. And now he's meeting his father who doesn't. That's like a simple thing. But all I know about Rotor is that he's like kind of a pragmatist, and he wants to help just as much as anybody else would want to help. And he's smart. The end. Like, that's all I get. So how does that connect to my dad's evil? Like, what about that character would make me think that he would care?
Mm-hmm.
Other than the fact that most people would care if their family member was evil. But who cares? So...
No,
yeah,
that's actually the worst part about it. Rotor doesn't even care. Like, he actually ends up saying in the story, is just like, well, I knew my dad was bad, but I didn't think he'd be that bad. And it's like, because even taking that, and that's even like the worst part. Even without establishing like anything beforehand, if Tundra was supposed to be Rotor's rival, the one thing you need to establish for a rivalry to be a rivalry is that the characters have some reason to be combative. Like, it's a personal reason for those two characters to be combative, either because their worldviews contrast, or their personalities contrast. This guy, or their direct personal motives contrast, or their worldviews contrast. That doesn't happen with Tundra or Rotor. Nor do they even establish that Rotor has any reason to want or see his dad again. Because even the story, he's just kind of like, well, my dad's bad, but.
It's more pointing to the concept of isn't the idea of someone's dad being evil like sad? And it's like, yeah, but why would I care about why do I care? Like, I can intellectually be like, yeah, that would suck, but why would I care? So,
and that's just kind of the thing. Flynn it's amazing to me how much Flynn just does not, unless you're like headfirst into Sonic lore, headfirst into really just trying to either headfirst into either like super just looking for Sonic content, or just looking for some reason to, or for one reason or another, just really just looking for Sonic content. You're headfirst into this kind of stuff. Flynn doesn't give you a reason to give a shit. He's just at best, he just kind of relies on shock value, but nothing really substantive outside, and nothing really but at best, nothing really substantive outside of it. And it's just kind of fascinating. And that's what I just find so fascinating about his writing. Not because he's good, not because he's like so obnoxiously bad, but he's fascinatingly vacuous as a writer. And I like breaking down about I like going through his stories and breaking down how he ends up being so vacuous, because this kind of like purposeless storytelling that only seems to perpetuate itself by either having characters be complete morons, or by just having bad stuff happen for the sake of bad stuff happening. It's kind of impressive. Honestly, it's just impressive about how much he's able to do this, and how little it seems to have any type of impact. And honestly, when you describe it to anyone else who's not headfirst just looking for Sonic content, anyone else is just like, wait, what are you talking about? And it's just that consistent problem over and over again. So that's what I find fascinating about his writing.
Yeah, no, that's honestly the kind of the perfect summation of kind of what our problems with the IDW Sonic comics are, and kind of pulls together, like you kind of half mentioned it there, but I do think that a lot of the enjoyment of it just comes from just wanting something Sonic. Because, you know, as a lot of people have kind of pointed out recently, it used to be like you got like 3 Sonic games a year, and then like there was like always like either like a TV show or like something going on. But nowadays it's like you have to wait like 40 years for a new Sonic game. There's barely any spin-offs anymore. There's nothing really, the marketing team is mostly just pushing classic Sonic. So if you're a modern Sonic fan, just like if you could get anything, to see these characters just doing anything, then, and it's got good art. So I just feel like that's kind of what's perpetuating enjoyment factor for people. when I just think that it could be a lot better. I think you should expect more. I just don't think it's given that to us. So
Yeah,
that's kind of my ending statement.
I will go and say this because the thing is, I was really wanting to try to go headfirst into the reboot and the Archie reboot because it had a lot of the same problems that honestly, as we found out with that. But the thing is, I didn't go into doing that because IDW was starting to start up again. I was like, I'll just wait for IDW to kick off and then I'll just break that down. But the thing is, there's actually one thing I find a little worse here because it's kind of hard to describe because I'm still trying to figure out like what it ultimately is. But what the best way I can describe it is, if you put me down, if I was put into two different situations. One, if I had to pick back up right after Archie, either the Archie Sonic reboot, or you told me to pick up right after however this Metal Sonic arc ends, I would have to do a lot of retooling, but I could do that with the reboot. I have no clue what to do with this material because the characters are barely defined and don't really have much to work off of or barely have any personality to really work off of or to really have any fun with or motivations or any type of character traits. Any type of character traits that you can really explore or delve into. There's nothing to the world or to the setting, and it's defined in such a way that you can't really just introduce a bunch of stuff without adding in plot holes. And there's really nothing of substance that really makes me go, if I didn't have and to be quite honest, if I didn't have some type of sick need to read this and break down how it fucks up in a lot of ways, I don't really know what someone could even do with this story at this point because it doesn't really give the audience anything to work with. Like one of my problems with IDW with the Archie reboot is that there didn't really seem like to be a core idea about what the story was trying to do at that point. And somehow Flynn found a way to make that worse here because at the very least you could try taking the background from the Archie reboot and messing with that to actually challenge the characters a little bit better. But here, it's such a blank slate, simultaneously a blank slate, but filled with a bunch of negative space that you can't really do anything with, that it's arguably worse than what Reboot Archie was. And Reboot Archie was not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like there's no kind of backdrop for him to really work on because he has to create a blank canvas. And it doesn't seem like he's that interested in making the characters anything more than kind of like what their bio might say under like personality.
And honestly,
and even then, barely.
So,
yeah. So do you have any other thoughts? I'm done. I think we covered a lot.
Oh yeah, we covered it. We covered all 27.
This is a really good stream. I'm actually really proud of this because we accidentally created a structure and we hit like a bunch of major points. I think we had a good back and forth. So yeah, do you have anything else you want to talk about? You can plug your stuff if you have anything.
I kind of have a huge. I really, oh god, I need to find a way to. I honestly probably. So I do have a YouTube account, and I need to start trying to upload stuff to that because I do have plenty of stuff to say, especially about not only Sonic but also Steven Universe and Doctor Who, because I really need to go talk about those two in particular. But for the most part,
is it just called Laviarray?
Yes, both my Twitter and my YouTube account are Laviarray, so just look me up there.
All right, cool. Yeah, you got anything else to say before I sign out?
We deserve better, guys.
Now, don't just accept what you're given, or at least don't accept it without thinking about it. If you've come to the terms of just like you like it for certain reasons, then I'm perfectly fine. But if your argument comes down to I just really want more Sonic content, then I think you could do better.
Or it's better than Pongraph or Penders. I still see people trying to make that case.
Right. Go watch Sonic Boom. That's a good one. Go do that.
Or the movie. The movie was good too. Go watch that.
Yeah, I enjoyed the movie. All right. Well, So I've been Ian Waffles, Kirby Sonic Team. If somehow you're a fan of mine, like the one in the 100 subscribers I have, and you made it this far, thank you. The next video is about Eri from My Hero Academia. So there you go. That's some inside baseball. You'll only know it at the 3 hours and 23-minute mark of this video. But thank you so much for coming out and talking with me, Laviarray.
Right.
We always talk about these things
Thank you for
in like
me.
Discord. Oh, no problem. Maybe we'll do something more like this. I kind of don't, though, want to do one about Reboot, because if it took us 3 hours to talk about 27 issues, we will die. So,
you know what? How about next weekend? Because I'm probably gonna be a little stressed. How about next weekend? Let's talk about the mandates.
we might. Just kind of depends on my schedule, but
All right,
yeah,
cool.
I think we should. I'll keep that in my back pocket as like something we could do some other time.
All right,
So,
cool.
all right, but thank you guys for watching. Have a good one. See ya.